Lord of Mysteries, Death. By author, Lucian_Morningstar. Chapter 21-40. Novel. November 30th, 1349. Convincing Reincarnated Tinker proved to be a challenge. Putting aside her reservations, talking to her four heads was like an uphill battle. Imagine each of her heads saying a word one at a time to build a long and drawn-out argument. That was the embodiment of their conversation. But Lucian had been working on his tolerance. He tolerated all of her words, but his tolerance did not translate into acceptance in the end, for her demand was, to be honest, brazen. He even began to suspect Reincarnated was just testing the waters. In exchange for joining their side for not only the conflict against the Rose school of thought but also the coming world war. Reincarnated demanded that her temperance faction remain autonomous even after everything settled down on the South Continent and a new government arose to rule it. Lucian didn't even consider her request. After all, he was going to be emperor. Nothing in his empire shouldn't be completely outside of his authority. Nonetheless, he made some concessions because Reincarnated Tinker was crucial to his plan to restrict the influence of Mother Tree of Desire from growing across the southern continent. Even if they were successful in eradicating the Indulge faction of the Rose school of thought, the corrupted Chatnid god remained, and through him, the Mother Tree of Desire could just keep propagating her influence, so someone was required, someone strong and willed enough to always be able to thwart it. Reincarnated was that someone, yes. Lucian planned to use her as a shield against Mother Tree of Destre until he was powerful enough to deal with Chained God himself. Even he had an offhand idea about allowing Reincarnated to ascend farther after obtaining the sequence 1 characteristic of the Chained Pathway, but it was simply an afterthought for now. Coming back to his concession, he allowed the Temperance faction to be semi-autonomous, although it would be under his direct purview. As he expected, Reincarnated was just testing the waters with her demand, as she didn't immediately deny his concession but hesitated in silence. To seal the deal, Lucian volunteered to heal her. Her injuries were mostly to her soul, and while most of them had been healed, some lingered deep within her. He could heal them with his soul authority, but it would take some time. This was also beneficial to him, for he preferred his alts in their peak state rather than injured and bruised. And he wasn't concerned that Reincarnated would reject his counter-proposal because the path he offered her was the only one that granted her hope and success. Ultimately, Reincarnated Tinker agreed and shook hands with him. After they discussed her healing sessions, she left for the northern continent. He calculated that by the time the assault on Lowen and Intis began, she would be in her peak state, and even if she wasn't, he would make sure she was, as they needed all the hands they could get for the assault to bring her faction back to their homeland. Speaking of the assault, in the great chamber of the numinous episcopate, there was a table in the shape of the known world, etched with its important cities, ports, landmarks, and so on. He had ordered its creation, drawing inspiration from the painted table from Game of Thrones, but it was extraordinary in comparison to its equivalent. And on it were the major military bases of Lowen and Intis, spread across the southern continent and seas, all blazing as crimson as the blood moon. Every day, strategies and tactics were being developed and scrapped with the goal of not only eliminating all military centers but also invading the northern continent. Invasion of the northern continent. Yes, Lucian intended to invade the northern continent. It was he who initiated this motion, with his angels immediately supporting him, albeit their apprehension was evident to him given how absurd his idea was. Absurd, but not improbable. If this were a normal world, a colony attempting to invade its colonizer immediately after winning independence would be ridiculous and inconceivable, but not here, since this was the world of mysteries, where anything was possible. But it would need time and effort for it to become a reality, much more than what is needed for the assault. First of all, the assault needed to be successful for the invasion to even be possible, as it would almost destroy the maritime and air superiority of the Northerners. All in all, the preparations for the assault were their priority. And it was coming along quite well. He had begun actively participating in the planning, for he had successfully amassed much knowledge in the art of warfare through his angels, but he was still not comparable to them, since some things could only be fully grasped through actual experience in the field. It did not matter how great his comprehension skills were. The preparations for the assault were led by Lucian and Sia, with Halter helping in from time to time as he was preoccupied with the task of controlling the local governments of East and West Balam. It was proven to be somewhat easy since the influence of the numinous episcopate extended there too. There was also the fact that the traditions and cultures of the southern continent highly respected faith and divinity, therefore, most administrative officials of the local governments practiced the religion of death in secret. All of this was assisting Hayter in winning their allegiance and reverence. He projected that by the middle of December, both governments would be under the rudimentary control of the numinous episcopate. And despite the angel of imagination, himself covering him, he was nevertheless careful not to leave any tracks. Adam. Lucian had been pondering consulting Adam on an important matter. It wasn't the deal Eamon had proposed, though it did cross his mind now and then. He knew that he had let his emotions influence his decision-making rather than being impartial with that deal, but you couldn't blame him given who Eamon was. For all he knew, the blasphemer may be using this so-called alliance as a cover to become heir, which required Eamon to replace someone who was undergoing apotheosis ritual with himself. Lucian had no intention of becoming a scapegoat for the god of deceit. Nevertheless, he still hasn't completely dropped the deal out of his mind, as with every passing day, he began to feel the precariousness of his future. As for the matter he meant to address with Adam, it was a complicated situation surrounding his father, Isaac Eggers. To be honest, he still wasn't sure what to think of his father, but regardless of his personal feelings, he acknowledged the importance of bringing his father back to the southern continent. After all, his father was essential in restoring the artificial death to its original state, the death uniqueness. Yes, he could try to use his soul authority to remove or destroy the half of his father's soul from the artificial death, but he decided to wait until he met with his father before making a decision. But meeting with his father was easier said than done, especially since Evernight Goddess was most certainly keeping a close check on him. It was such a perilous situation that even he felt helpless in the face of it, which is why he considered counseling Adam about it. That's how he ended up standing in front of the corpse cathedral, which was now deep within the mind realm, after ultimately deciding to go through with it. He'd always made his way here owing to a badge stamped with the symbol of a cross that Adam had given him, for the corpse cathedral never lasted in one place for more than a day. Begrudgingly ignoring the picturesque surroundings of the mind world, Lucian entered the corpse cathedral with solemnity, and he was immediately welcomed by the bones of gods, carved across the cathedral in holy grimness. No matter how many times he came here, he still couldn't get used to this strange cathedral. Adam was there, but he was not praying to himself, like usual. Rather, he sat in the front row, penning a book with a black quill. Lukton approached Adam quietly, peeking at the book as he sat next to the Angel of Imagination, but Adam closed the book before he could see anything, much to his dismay, as he suspected Adam was literally writing the changes into the trend of times. Is that? Lucian asked tentatively. Yes, Adam replied lightly, his gaze fixed on Lucian. My novel, The Fifth Epic. Okay, that was something, Lucian gulped. Why are you revealing this to me? This was no coincidence, the Reaper reasoned. Adam was deliberately disclosing this to him. I have been stuck on a chapter for some time, Adam said. Quote, what is the title of the chapter? Lucian questioned tentatively, to the tune of Adam. The World War. Adam held the silver cross around his neck. The World War, Lucian's heart sank. On which event are you struck? The Balam Empire invades the northern continent. Adam revealed, meeting his eyes. So you are stuck on my plan. Lucian guessed wryly. How did it go? Did we fail abysmally? Yes. Adam spoke slowly. But not for the reasons you think. His voice grew deep, containing something otherworldly and mythical, as if he were reciting a prophecy. The Balam Empire and all its allies successfully invaded the northern continent under the leadership of the fallen angel, causing the red of war to spread throughout the world, affecting everything, including the anchors, which ultimately induced the gods to descend into the world with their true bodies to put an end to it. Victory. Yes. Adam spoke slowly. But not for the reasons you think. His voice grew deep, containing something otherworldly and mythical, as if he were reciting a prophecy. The Balaam Empire and all its allies successfully invaded the northern continent under the leadership of the fallen angel, causing the red of war to spread throughout the world, affecting everything, including the anchors, which ultimately induced the gods to descend into the world with their true bodies to put an end to it. The gods descending into the world with their true bodies. Lucian groaned inwardly, this changes everything. After all, what was the point of all those efforts if a god could simply descend into the world and destroy everything? And there was nothing they could do in the face of them because the power of gods was too immense for anybody or anything less than divine to bear, let alone resist. Actually, Lucian had considered the descent of gods while formulating his plans, but it was in the event where the gods went down through vessels, where their powers and abilities would have been limited, rather than the prospect of them descending with their true bodies. Don't get him wrong, he knew he'd have to personally confront Evernight goddess and god of combat when he began his apotheosis, but this was not at all what he was anticipating. This truly changed everything. Is this their move, huh? To say Lucian was frustrated would be an understatement. His emotions had escaped his control and spilled on his face. Well played. Nonetheless, he gathered himself, took a deep breath, and then offered a guess to Adam in an attempt to gain a complete picture of the situation. How, though? Don't the gods need to support the broken barrier? Adam retorted. That was not what kept them from descending into the world. Rather, it was a contract they signed at the end of the fourth epoch, considering the devastation left behind by the War of Four Emperors. They wanted to let the earth heal and thrive without their direct intervention, and it did, flourishing into what you see now. Therefore, they always upheld the contract until Lucian abruptly cut in. Yes, you. Adam gently nodded. You broke the trend at times, destroying not only my plans but also theirs, forcing them to admit at last that it was sometimes better to act than to direct. Okay, hearing those words from Adam sure sounds strange. Lucian chuckled inwardly, attempting to calm his chaotic heart. Adam continued. As a result, they broke the contract, freely themselves from the restrictions imposed on them. But, surely, they can't just come down here whenever they want. Lucian refused to give up hope. Considering the barrier and all. Lucian, you just need to understand. Adam peered at Lucian with his limpid eyes. That they can now descend into the world with their true bodies. He paused. Yes, they must continue to support the barrier, but it will be no problem for them to descend to Earth if they believe the situation requires it. So, what are you going to do now? The Angel of Imagination inquired, clearly not wanting to pass up another chance to put Lucian to the test. Honestly, he still didn't understand why Adam always tended to do this. Of course, what else is there to do but die? Lucian thought pessimistically, despite the fact that his thinking had already begun to devise strategies to deal with this almost hopeless situation since Adam revealed his prophecy. After all, giving up was not an option in his books. Advance my plans to become a god. The Reaper revealed his on-the-spot plan to the Angel of Imagination. And keep the attention of the gods on me and my situation, for if they are ultimately going to descend on the world, they might as well come down during my apotheosis. What an apocalyptic plan! The War of Gods was bound to happen when his apotheosis began, so it might as well happen on Earth. Oh, gods, he had changed. That is a good plan. Adam stated. If Lucian didn't know any better, he'd think the Angel of Imagination was impressed with his proposal. The Son of Creator continued warmly. The coming world war is entirely dependent on your existence. If you perish, everything perishes with you. So by following this plan, the gods could indeed focus on you when the war reaches its peak, but it is still based on too many suppositions and uncertainties. Hey, Lucian shrugged dismally. It's better than nothing. Your plan actually has potential. Adam gently corrected. And a lot of work needs to be done for it to be conceivable. I know, Lucian sighed tiredly, then continued, bringing up the problem that led him here. Speaking of the plan, there is still the problem with the artificial death. You want to meet your father. Adam immediately deduced. Yes, Lucian admitted and explained the situation. I must obtain the uniqueness as soon as possible. My father is needed for this. A part of his soul still exists within the artificial death, supporting its consciousness. Therefore, if I wish to eliminate it, I must either destroy or remove part of his soul. You have the option of destroying it, Adam pointed out. Yet you still haven't taken it. Lucian was silent for a moment, then replied, looking away. I don't want to deprive my father of his choice. After everything he's been through, he deserves it. Humanity, Adam whispered under his breath, his limpid eyes shining ever so slightly. What was that? Lucian pressed, his brow creasing. Adam obviously didn't answer his question, rather he said about the situation of his father. Azek Eggers is in the northern continent. As for his exact location, I can try to find it, but Ammonizes will probably find out my prying and conceal him entirely. Lucian contemplated his words, and then he asked offhandedly. Suppose I meet my father, is it possible for Evernight Goddess to try to deal with me then and there? Ammonizes is never the one to take a direct approach. Adant chastised. And if she does want to confront you, she will do so on her terms, not yours. On her terms, huh? That's fantastic, Lucian reflected wryly. I want to bring my father back to the southern continent. He declared his intention after restraining his thoughts. The best time for you to do that is December 28th. Your father will arrive in Backland to help Klein, Adam advised, after a moment of thought. But won't the Evernight Goddess also be in Backland that day? Lucian retorted. Adam didn't respond. Instead, he rose from his seat and went ahead, and Lucian soon followed. The Angel of Imagination came to a halt in front of a pillar encrusted with demonic wolf bones. Do you know who these bones belong to? When Lucian gazed at the bones, information about them flowed into his head, including when and where they died as well as who they were while they were alive. He called this skill, Death Sight. Annihilation Demonic Wolf Flegre. Lucian took a deep breath and responded solemnly as images from the past ran through his head. The Reaper witnessed the fall of Flegre and how Lilith, the sanguine ancestor, dragged down the demonic wolf with her to their graves. The apocalyptic darkness and harrowing crimson filled everything for a moment before dying out together into a reckoning silence. As the terrible picture faded, Lucian realized what Adam was trying to express by showing him this. As long as the Evernight Goddess didn't descend in her true form, Adam would have no trouble keeping her busy with his cathedral filled with the corpses of gods. What is the price? Lucian did not overlook the crucial question. By the time I go after the Quill of Alzuhad, the war would have started, and the world would be in chaos. Adam said faintly. The Quill may try to take advantage of the chaos, and there is even a chance it may try to attract the attention of the three betrayers, so I want you to participate in that event and restrain the chaos to the greatest extent possible. All right, let's consider this. A sadistic quill, a deranged demigod, a band of avengers, a company of kings of angels, and the probable involvement of other angels, even divine intervention. Lucian considered his proposal for a moment. Whoa, what a recipe for calamity. Nevertheless, the Reaper declared firmly. I agree. Adam gently nodded, then warned. When entering the northern continent, don't do so with your true body. Lucian nodded, knowing he'd probably be blasted by lightning the moment he took his first step onto the northern continent with his true body. Even if he wanted to, he couldn't because he was going to directly join in the assault on Loan and Intis, along with his angels and allies. I'll make arrangements for that, he finally said, thinking of a specific ability that came with his soul authority. Adam stated. Now for the assault. He met his silver eyes. Remember, speed is the key to the coming event. You must completely destroy the hold the northern continent has on the southern continent before they could respond. Lucian hummed compliantly, comprehending the stacks at hand. If they fail to do so, George Augustus III will most likely use his authority to literally support the hold of the northern continent, putting all of their efforts to waste. So about your chapter of World War. The Reaper tentatively brought back the conversation to the pressing matter at hand. Has anything changed? Adam took an unnerving moment to respond, his golden eyes shining lightly. The ending remains the same. The gods will descend into the world in their true bodies to end the war, but how that will happen has become unclear. That's good. Lucian exhaled a sigh of relief, as if a weight had been removed from his shoulders. That's good. Go and prepare for the assault. Adam instructed lightly. Once you've completed this, we'll talk about more about the chapter of the World War. So I'll be victorious? Lucian asked tersely. What do you think? Adam asked back. Victory is in my veins. Lucian declared dauntlessly, gradually regaining his spirits. A smile began at the corner of his lips, illuminated by the unreal light of the mind world. Prelude. 27th of December, 13-49. The stars were shining mythically in the dark blanket spread over the earth by the Evernight goddess, as if they were feeling the approach of something epical, something monumental, something memorial. In the disputed borders of the east and west Balam, there wove a mountain range, tall and mighty, spitting the southern continent. Ilinsa, they called it, and it housed the headquarters of the numinous episcopate. It would be an understatement to describe the headquarters as grim, as it was a relic from bygone times, representing everything that the Balam Empire represented: cold, drafty, and cruel. And within it was the main hall, raised by black gold pillars that all wove higher to support a dome surrounded by stained windows, and behind them was the crimson moon, casting its ominous light into the halls. Crimson drapes swirled across an unusual table. It was shaped like the known world, with all of its major landmarks inscribed on it. Military bases sprawled throughout the southern continent and the seas, shining ever so eerily in the red of the crimson moon. A hand abruptly reached into the crimson, darkening it, and rhythmically knocked on the table. Let's begin, Lucian declared, retracing his hand. He sat at the head of the painted table, surrounded by grounded angels. On his right were his angels, Sta Palenque Eggers and Hatter, and on his left were his elites, Reinette Tinker and Hermes, all somberly gazing down at the table. The Reaper stood up from his silver chair. Under the cordial gaze of everyone, he stepped closer to the painted table and placed his index finger on a specific section of the table, where a crimson mark glinted specifically next to the silver letters of Kalain. The military base of Loan in Kalain. Lucian stated. It is the world's largest base, and it also houses the majority of Loan's navy fleet. His finger slid smoothly across the table to the next nearby crimson mark, which was in the location of Western Balam. The Intis Navy base in Caesar Harbor. He slid to the island near the edge of the Sonia Sea. The Fesak military settlement in Konotop Island. To summarize, Loan, Intis, and Fesak all have military bases throughout the southern continent and islands that surround it. The Loan bases were in Kalain City, Waypoint Island, Dulanias Island, and Byam. The Intis bases were Caesar Harbor, Bahurns City, Halman Island, and Poto Island. The Fesak base was on Konotop Island. The majority of bases were headed by demigods, while the most important ones, such as Kolian, Byam, and Kaksar, were overseen by saints. In terms of angels, there was only Sylvia Augustus, Sequence 2 of the Justiciar pathway, who controlled the entire theater of the southern continent for Loan. By the twilight of tomorrow, all of these bases must be completely destroyed, Lucian concluded deeply, his gleaming eyes tracing the angels seated in front of him. They wore a dark expression as his words poured into their hearts, compelling them to comprehend the gravity of what they were about to unleash on the world. Bayan. Hermes shattered the deafening silence of the dark chambers, pointing at the Rorstad archipelago. Are we sure about this? At Lucian's request and Adam's directions, the creator of ancient Hermes had come to assist with the assault. The situation of the Rorstad archipelago is indeed complicated. Sta leaned forward in her seat, weighing her options. We have little to no sway there. It also has an important division of the Church of Storms, with its headquarters right nearby. The storm will rage on. Reinette spoke up silently, her bloody eyes fixated on the Rorstad archipelago. She looked like a huge cloth doll with blonde hair and bright red eyes, and she wore a long black Gothic dress with countless mysterious patterns engraved on it. Swirling around it were sinister vines. Her skin had a luster that no human should possess. After attending the healing sessions with Lucian, Reinette Tinker had returned to perfect and peak condition. She was a true ancient Bane, the Queen of Curses. Indeed, he will. Hatter raised his voice. If we stick to the same plan we have for island bases, we may end up facing the full might of the Church of Storms in the Rorstad archipelago. And that's why we won't, as we previously discussed, we won't be occupying the Rorstad archipelago like the other island bases. Lucian stated matter-of-factly, his legs were crossed. Given the importance of the Rorstad archipelago on the global stage, Lucian was determined to bring it under the jurisdiction of the numinous episcopate. Whoever controlled the Rorstad archipelago would have significant power over the world's oceans and trade. If his organization seized it, they could use it as an avenue to invade the northern continent. However, the Reaper understood it was a pipe dream to try to occupy the Rorstad archipelago during their assault, unlike the other sea islands. The best they could do in their assault was demolish the military base and throw the administration there into chaos, removing it from Lowen's control. And, if his assumptions were accurate, the entire Rorstad archipelago would be turned into a battleground between the northern and southern continents, where the initial phase of the World War would be decided. Lucian continued, his silver gaze flicking to Sia. You will personally lead the assault on Biome since there is a good chance that an angel of the Lord of Storms will intervene in the end. Sia stood up and accepted his order unfeignedly. Just in case, take a GRADE-0 sealed artifact with you. Lucian said, after a moment of consideration. Which one do you want? The blood necklace. Sia immediately said. Biome spelled trouble, she could feel it in her bones, therefore, she ought to be cautious. And the blood necklace was one of the Grade O sealed artifacts held by the numinous episcopate. It was created from the Sequence 2 characteristic of a bloody archduke, who was slaughtered by Sia and Hater during their wars with the devil families. You may retrieve it after the meeting. Lucian hummed and pointed at the Lowen military base in Kalane. The destruction of this base is critical to our assault, but Sylvia Angustus is the obstacle we must overcome in order to win. He shifted his gaze to Hater. So, Hater, I bestow this responsibility upon you. I will bring you the head of Sylvia, my lord. Hater rose up and spoke vehemently, his voice full of confidence, which was not unfounded since if things seemed dire, he could pray to artificial death and allow its power to seep into reality. It was a dangerous bid, but triumph was never attained without taking risks. No need, Lucian shook his head, his lips twitching. Just bring her characteristic. Hater nodded vehemently, accepting his order. Lucian then pressed on the Caxar harbor. The Intis Navy base at Caesar Bay, his gleaming gaze wandered to the doll-like angel to his left. You will take the lead here. Reincarnated Tinker gave him an impassive stare. I will, but once I reveal myself, the Rose School of Thought will no longer be able to sit still. In fact, the Rose School of Thought will attack us with full force. Linetton relayed the prophecy he had received from Adam, causing a haze of heaviness to descend over the painted table. This was actually inevitable, for the Rose of School wielded great power in the Western Balam, second only to Intis, so it was a hurdle they had to overcome one way or another to take complete control of the Western Balam. The Indulgence faction of the Rose School of Thought was strong, extremely so. It was led by Sua, an archangel, and Berjana, an angel, both of whom were certain to take part in the upcoming assault. And there was also a chance that the corrupted chained god could make an indirect appearance. I will draw Berjana and face him in Caesar Bay. Reincarnated Tinker declared. Lucian concurred, I think that only leaves Sua. He came to a halt, gazing around. I will have to face. My lord, Halter spoke up straight away. Please reconsider. Yes, my lord. Sia concurred. Reincarnated Tinker merely gazed at Lucian deeply, while Hermes spoke up in warning, siding with the Death Councils. I think we can all agree this is a trap. The only reason they'd go all out is to get you. The creator of ancient Hermes met the silver eyes of his student gravely. Mother Tree of Desire intends to corrupt you during the attack, Lucian. I understand your concerns, Lucian replied in a tone that left no space for further debate. However, just as our conflict with the Rose School of Thought was unavoidable, so is this. I will face Sua and slay him. The Reaper declared. Silence fell over the table, as everyone knew that once Lucian made a decision, it was final. No amount of argument or persuasion could change his mind. He could be headstrong like that. But they weren't that worried, as he was as cautious as he was obstinate. Moving on, Lucian continued, breaking the silence. Teacher. I understand. Hermes nodded, well aware of his role in the impending assault. I will provide support and prevent the information from spreading. It was a crucial duty. As everyone else was engaged in conflicts, an angel was needed to swiftly respond to requests for help and deal with any unforeseen variables. And, despite the fact that the visionary pathway lacks information authority, they were nonetheless unrivaled manipulators, all too perfect for keeping a tight lid on information. Then the meeting carried on. After delegating tasks to angels, Lucian moved on to saints and demigods. They were actually the main force in the assault, backed by the middle sequence Beyonders. Yes, the numinous episcopate was going all out tomorrow. They had to, considering the success of the assault completely depended on speed. They couldn't hold hack, even if they wanted to. Lucian and his angels had already devised strategies and plans and also drafted the position and role each high-sequence Beyonder would have to play tomorrow. They had even separated a group with a saint, 3 demigods, and many mid-sequence Beyonders, with the role of confronting the forces of the Indulgence faction. Nonetheless, the Reaper briefed everyone on the plans for last-minute checks and changes. All listened closely, occasionally chiming in to turn their assault into an airtight attack. Finally, Lucian began to draw the curtains on their meeting. Remember that our goal is not to fight but to destroy and occupy, particularly Santa. He emphasized, you don't even need to occupy, you just need to destroy. Tomorrow, my lord, Biam will burn. Sia declared, her countenance marred by grim anticipation. Lucian stepped up and declared, each syllable punctuated with graveness. Tomorrow, as Backland covers in smog of despair, we shall rain down hell on the world. History. December 28, 1349. Backland, Lowen Kingdom. As the sky of Backland lit up with crimson trowels, Bernadette Gustave knew it was time. She could almost hear the rustling of papers and the quivering of a quill in the echoes of fate, all coming together to form a grand play. A grand play about the return of the evil gods. True creator. Primordial demoness. The Queen Mystic recalled all of the information she had managed to gather. What could have pushed them to do this in their own city? Nonetheless, she didn't dwell on it, for now was not the time. For all she knew, the Quill of Alzuhad might have discovered her existence despite Lucian's blessing and her precautions. Anyway, with her eventually entering the stage from behind the curtains, it was inevitable. Bernadette Gustave rose from her seat in her carriage, carrying her most powerful scaled artifacts with her. She placed her hand on the door knob, took a deep breath, and prepared herself before opening the door, revealing the Empress burrow filled with nobles coming out of their houses, looking up in astonishment at the asteroids plummeting from the sky. As soon as she stepped onto the ground, her figure became imaginary and ethereal, melting into the palette of hues that was the spiritual realm. An ordinary-looking quill, which was writing the grand play about the return of the evil gods on its own, suddenly froze, and its surface dimmed visibly. The solemn-looking middle-aged man with only one eye grabbed it and quickly wrote as if he were channeling a spirit. It was obvious that Isaac Eggers had yet to recover all his memories and strength. While attempting to travel through the spirit world and the astral world, a latent danger appeared as a result of this problem. Hence, he and Sherlock Moriarty found themselves landing near Inszangwil and his friend. The ruins of the Solomon Empire, somewhere outside Backland. Isaac Eggers and Klein Moretti looked ahead as Inszangwil walked out of the bronze door. Just as Klein was about to turn and run up the road, wholeheartedly following Mr. Isaac's instructions, he understood that he would be nothing more than a burden in the battle between demigods. A quill shot out from Inszangwil and began writing on the wall at a speed that would have put a cheetah to shati. It wrote, "Poor Inszangwil, his fate seemed to have been infected with misfortune, for everything he touched ended in failure, and now seemed no different. For unknown reasons, the Queen Mystic happened to be in Backland. She was attracted by the commotion, turning her clairvoyant eyes to find the source of it all. Oh no, she is descending into ruins." Just as the quill finished, a lady materialized in between them. She had chestnut hair that fell to her waist and purple eyes that shone brightly, as if they were spying on the secrets of the world. Bernadette Gustave. Isaac and Ince recognized the famous Queen of Pirates in sync, then their thoughts separated, trying to make sense of her appearance. So this is Rusel's daughter. Azek reflected, puzzled as to why he strangely felt bitter against her. Why is she here? Ince thought, first of all, how is she here? Even if she is a saint, she can't have gone unnoticed by the Quill. No, this changes everything. As for Klein, his thoughts were quite jumbled. It's her. Those black leather boots. Did she find out I am the hero bandit Black Emperor? And who would have thought she was the famous Queen Mystic? As the moment passed, Bernadette met the dark eyes of Azek, and an unspoken understanding seemed to pass between them. Bernadette then appeared near Klein, startled him, and placed her hand tightly over his shoulders. Just as the Queen Mystic wanted to teleport through the spirit world, which she could do now with the combination of the blessing of the Reaper and her powers, a regal and dignified voice reverberated throughout the broken hall. Teleportation is prohibited here. A figure had arrived beside Ince Zangwill without anyone noticing. He was suspended in mid-air, defying the rules of physics. He wore a gorgeous gold mask. Sequence 4, Imperative Mage. Bernadette, on the other hand, simply stared at the M19 demigod impassively before her, and Klein's figures dissolved into bubbles and vanished into thin air. It was a spell named Bubble, created from mythical reenactment. It was one of the fairy tale spells that Bernadette grafted from the fairy tales that her father had told her. And technically, even though this spell had an effect similar to teleportation, in essence, it wasn't. So the Queen Mystic successfully exploited the loophole in the law established by the Imperative Mage, descending into the other side of the ruins along with Klein. All the while, Ince Zangwill wasn't idle. As Sequence 4 Nightwatcher of the Darkness Pathway could grant a certain amount of bad luck to others, Ince, who had just silently blessed Klein and Bernadette to try disrupting the spell, found it baffling that not only were they successful, but even his blessing transferred back to him. Not only that, Ince Zangwill seemed to be hallucinating as well, as he saw a thin, grayish-white fog. But before he could comprehend his complete failure, Ince noticed that the abyss-like fracture to his side had ruptured with gallons and gallons of illusory, pitch-black liquid, creating a dark tsunami that raced towards him and the Imperative Mage. What was actually terrifying was that the surface of the wave was loaded with pale-skinned arms widely extending forth, as if attempting to grab and drag everyone into pits of hellish damnation. And in the midst of it all, Azek Eggers floated gently, untouched and unperturbed, like a fallen monarch emerging from the underworld. At the same time, on the opposite side of the ruins, Bernadette and Klein descended into a lengthy corridor packed with dust-covered murals, directly avoiding the guards. "You just left him," Klein managed, feeling his shoulders slightly ache. "He can manage." Bernadette spoke in a gentle yet emotionless tone. "He is a lot stronger than you think. Mr. Azek is more powerful than a demigod." Klein thought in surprise. "There are more pressing issues that require my attention," Bernadette continued, her voice slightly tightening. "Follow my instructions if you want to make it out of this alive." She peered at Klein with a touch of familiarity. Klein was beginning to become highly suspicious that the Queen Mystic already knew he was the one who took the card of blasphemy right under her nose, or, in her case, foot. Hearing her remarks, which were practically an unspoken order, he nodded, putting on a veneer of compliance. Of course, he didn't trust her, but the situation he was in didn't leave him much of a choice. "Come on." Bernadette went swiftly down the corridor towards the huge door at the end, and Klein followed her, his mind sharp and his posture alert. When they arrived at that point, he noticed that there were no guards at the entryway. He wanted to perform a swift divination with his coin, but she stopped him by pointing to the door first, then placing her finger on her lips, indicating him to follow her silently. Klein begrudgingly complied, and they passed right through the wall, using the spirit world, without taking the door. The first thing he saw was the natural light that fell from the dome, which indicated that this place was an exit out of the ruins, and this made him feel a bit of relief, but he didn't let it get to his head, moving into the shadows of the hall unnoticeably. From the corner of his eyes, though, he saw, in the middle of the hall, 4 hooded figures kneeling around what appeared to be an altar. Soon after, Klein and Bernadette heard a soft, gentle female voice. "Mr. A, are you ready?" Panatia, the Lady Despair, never failed to admire the belief that the Aurora Order has in the true Creator. It was the type of faith that led to self-sacrifice. They were willing to submit and give everything to their God. Such devotion was rare, if not unseen, even in this world of gods. Consider her current situation. She was subtly indicating to Mr. A zealot thorough, that they were intending to use Aurora Order as a scapegoat to cover up the evidence of human trafficking committed by her organization and all of its partners in East Borough. And Mr. A didn't mind taking the fall for them. All he cared about was returning his Lord to the world, and he was even more than happy to have everyone witness the glory of his Lord. Hearing his indifferent yet vehement declaration, even Lady Despair was somewhat taken aback. Nevertheless, she wanted to continue with the matter at hand, but just then someone interrupted them. "Who permitted you to enter? Didn't I declare that no one is to approach this Akka?" Panatia snapped at the intruder, suppressing her rage. "Lady Despair, there's an emergency. Someone has infiltrated the basement. The higher-ups sent me to arrange for a follow-up and close the corresponding passages." Lady Despair closed her eyes, silently communicating with Celine, who is the Lady Calamity, one of the leaders of the demoness sect. Then she opened her eyes impassively, though her heart was grim. Isaac Eggers. Bernadette Gustave, what a troubling development. Restraining her thoughts, she swiftly dismissed the intruder and looked toward Mr. A, who spoke up in a deep and hoarse voice. "I smell an accident. Let's begin." Lady Despair responded gently, "That's exactly what I was thinking, but I need you to send me to East Borough." Mr. A did as he was told, sending her tearing through space to land on an uninhabited, secluded, and filthy corner of an alley. She pulled down her veil to cover her face and looked up into the sky. The afternoon sun had once again been obscured by clouds and fog, turning pale and dark. The light yellow fog wasn't particularly thick, and it sank down to every corner of Racklund, giving off a slight choking sensation amidst its coldness and moisture. It's a pity that the haze didn't reach the point when it's in its worst and calmest state. The accident that happened to Trissa, the sudden and temporary loss of control over 008, the unexpected appearance of Isaac and Bernadette, and the destruction previously caused by the Dark Emperor complicated matters, garnering the attention of others. It forced the operation to be brought forward to today. Lady Despair surveyed the area, walked out of the alley, and into the streets. Wherever she passed, the fog would unnoticeably thicken. Tinged with an iron-black color, it silently lowered one's visibility. A haze that was a mixture of iron-black and pale yellow colors descended upon East Borough, the dock area, and the smoke-spewing factory district as it continued to spread throughout Backland. Various scenes in the distance were drowned out, and even the towering clock tower was only a pale shadow. One by one, workers and poor people felt the discomfort as they fought against the cold, and the disorderly tramps fell one after another in the woman's wake, their lives as fragile as the bubbles formed during laundry. Lady Despair's expression was calm and gentle, as though she were finishing a work of art. She slowly walked among the struggling pedestrians as she chuckled and said in a low voice, "The Lowen Kingdom's history will remember this day. The Great Haze of Racklund. Headquarters of the numinous episcopate, Iliniza." Lucian glanced in the direction of the northern continent, feeling the changes in Backland through his coin held by Bernadette. And his posture turned grim and somber. He glanced down at the painted table, connecting with the spiritual network that was linked to all of the high-sequence beyonders of the numinous episcopate. The Reaper declared, his voice sonorous and resonant, passing through the network. "The world's history will remember this day. The fall of colonialism." Lucian took a deep breath. "Attack." He boomed. Immediately, across the skies above the military bases spread throughout the southern continent and seas of the world, there were flashes of light that seemed to illuminate everything, then they instantly converged to form bronze doors, all as tall and colossal as a tower, and they together opened. A bone-chilling echo was heard throughout military outposts, creeping into the ears of every single soldier. They froze in place, halting whatever they were doing. Together, with pale faces and wide eyes, they slowly looked up into the sky, only to witness the last sight of their lives. And what a breathtaking sight it was literally. From the door, with the eternal darkness, came spirits, army after army, all crashing down from the sky onto the army bases, heralding destruction, despair and death. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. Judgment. The ruins of the Solomon Empire, Backland. Klein sucked in a deep breath after the Lady Despair left, his mind slowly connecting the dots after overhearing the demoness. He cast a subconscious glance towards Queen Mystic, whose expression had practically crumpled, her eyes darting with a look of realization. The fool immediately knew that the Queen of Pirates probably inferred the secret behind this whole event. The Queen Mystic caught his gaze, tilted her head towards the altar where the ritual was about to commence, and they together ran out of the darkness. The first thing they noticed was the altar, which was encircled by layers of light, and the tall, thin figure standing on it. The figure took off its hood, revealing a beautiful, devilishly feminine face with a left chest, shoulders, abdomen, and thighs all covered in squirming, sticky, disgusting flesh and blood. Beyond the altar, the four hooded figures were in genuflecting positions, and only their eyes were visible, which were filled with reverence and piety. And at the top of the hall, rays of light pierced through the air, quickly entering the altar through the stone pillars, floor, and air that were filled with symbols and magic labels. As soon as they emerged from his hiding place, Mr. A opened his eyes and looked in their direction. His pupils were dyed with blood, and an extreme madness was contained within his cold eyes. The moment the Queen Mystic saw Mr. A, she instinctively clenched her right hand and conjured an ancient spear. The spear was ruby red from tip to handle. Spear of Longinus. This weapon had appeared in an unknown ancient era, stained with the blood of a great existence. At this moment, it had descended into the ruins of Solomon Empire through mystical reenactment, emitting a terrifying aura that froze everything and everyone in the ruins for a moment. Klein blinked, his back soaked in sweat. The crimson spear gave him a fatal feeling, as though if it were aimed at him, he'd be doomed no matter what he did. And he was proven true, since when Queen Mystic launched the red spear at Mr. A, he instinctively tried to resist, even attempting to teleport, but it was as futile as trying to run from a tsunami. The crimson spear accurately pierced his chest, and he let out a blood-curdling roar filled with such hatred and rage that even Klein flinched inwardly before his figure was drowned out by the red light that erupted from the spear, spreading outward into the altar, then stone pillars briefly illuminating everything in the hall. After a heartbeat, the red light faded away, filled in by serene silence, and Klein sucked in a sharp breath, looking ahead. Is this the might of a high-sequence Beander? Before him, the altar had disappeared, along with all of its symbols and magic labels, into nothingness. It was simple for him to infer what had happened. The Queen Mystic had completely destroyed Mr. A and his ritual in a single attack. This meant that she had entirely stopped True Creator's descent without breaking a sweat. It isn't as simple as you think, the Queen Mystic spoke up, her creepy purple eyes peering into him. The ritual was doomed to fail. Even if I hadn't been present, someone would have stopped it. She paused, her brows pinched in thought. Perhaps by you as well. Klein did not refute it. He knew he was foolish and stupid enough to have done exactly that if he had been alone here. Now the question was, would he have survived in the end? Leave this place. The Queen Mystic spoke as her figure faded into a palette of colors and space. Klein hesitated for a while before nodding tightly, knowing that he would only be a burden in the approaching battle between the Queen Mystic and the Lady Despair. The Queen Mystic then vanished. The Lowen military base, Colian, East Balam. Alfred Hall, the second son of Earl Hall and a brigadier general of the Lowen military, was going through his monthly inspection across the military base with his subordinates. It was a tiresome task, to be honest, considering sheer size of the base and everything it held. Alfred, though, did the inspection dedicatedly, as he had done for the past 2 years since becoming brigadier general. In the military, duty always came first. It was a lesson he had learned the hard way in his chivalrous days. He slowly walked to the edge of the watchtower, overlooking the military base with his azure eyes. For a moment, he took it all in, basking in the glory of Lowen. The crown must win, Alfred thought of the unofficial motto of the royal family, must always win. If he thought about it, it was certainly appropriate, reflecting everything Lowen stood for. They may have faced numerous hurdles, losses, and defeats along the way, but victory was always theirs. Always. At the moment, there was a flash of light in the sky, prompting him and everyone else in the base to subconsciously gaze up. What he saw there froze him in his tracks, his face becoming pale as he faced the horrifying sight. A gigantic bronze door rose vertically in the sky above their stronghold, and thousands of spirits poured out of it, like the legendary army of death creeping out of hell itself, all crashing down towards the base, bringing with it darkness that threatened to consume everything and everyone. It was the most terrifying sight Alfred had ever seen, but with terror came determination, pushing him out of a stupor. But before he could issue orders to his frozen subordinates in an effort to have them defend their haze with all they had, something bright and stormy filled his vision. And he felt light, all strength escaping him. He could somehow see a bronze arm reaching out to him from an endless height, plunging and claiming his satchel for itself. It is death, Alfred realized in a last moment of harsh clarity. Death has come for me. Mother, father, Hibbert, Audrey, he managed, words escaping his withering lips as last and final whispers. I'm sorry. And then all vitality left him, and in his place was no longer the smart and diligent young man but a withered husk, wilted and broken. The harsh reality was that death had arrived not just for Albert but for everyone and everything below demigods at military bases across the southern continent and seas. In a single and untied event, the saints of numinous episcopate unleashed their twilight storms, which swept throughout the military bases within a moment, and everything it touched, from beyonders to mortals, ships to planes, buildings to towers, withered and rotted, all breaking and falling into the embrace of death in repose and silence. And the storms all but destroyed any fight the troops tried to put up against the descending army of spirits, allowing them to deafeningly touch down on the collapsing bases, and they brought death with them, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. Ultimately, the truth was that Alfred Hall was nothing but another insignificant soul mercilessly claimed by the surging trend of the times. With the element of surprise, the strategic planning of Lucian and his angels, and the covering of the Angel of Imagination, the first stage of the assault was extremely successful. Within moments of the assault, the military bases throughout the southern continent and seas were enveloped in the veil of death. Nothing below demigods managed to escape the initial attacks from the numinous episcopate, which almost turned the bases into wasteland filled with ashes and debris, devoid of life and vitality. It was a dreadful and harrowing sight for all the survivors to behold. The military might of the world's most powerful countries was wiped out just like that. Nevertheless, the assault was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. A copper light shot out from the ruins of Culain to the bronze door, pausing right in front of descending legions of spirits and unveiling what appeared to be a colossal judgment scale flickering with mythical specks of light that emitted a strict and harsh aura. And from within it, a regal and majestic voice resounded far and wide with suppressed rage and fury. Weaken mysticism, enhance reality. Immediately, a suppression descended throughout the southern continent. All beyonders below the level of angels felt their powers decline along with other supernatural forces, while things based in the material world became more effective. However, the suppression was not evenly distributed, focusing on the wrecked military bases, particularly on numinous episcopate members who were now infiltrating the bases to cull the last survivors as well as the powers they had unleashed, though the level of suppression each bore differed depending on their sequences. This was one of the most potent skills of the Justiciar pathway. It was obtained when one ascended to the level of demigod, and as one ascended further, the power and effectiveness of this ability increased with them to the point where the Justiciar, the sequence 0, could use this ability to deprive every single Beander in the world who were not mythical creatures of their abilities or increase the power of conventional weapons to the point where they could even kill mythical creatures. The Night Emperor used this ability when he betrayed the 7 gods in the War of 4 Emperors. That day, he alone nearly brought down all of the Orthodox churches. Now, The one who executed this ability was none other than Sylvia Augustus, Field Marshal of Loan Military and an Angel of Justiciar Pathway, who had entered her mythical creature form. And the results were immediate. Leaving aside the suppressed Beyonders, the bronze doors that hung above the bases began to darken and wane with the army spirits, as if they were going to vanish into nothingness. But before that could happen, something interrupted. It was a heavy and severe bam, like a judge slamming his gavel and passing a judgment, which wouldn't be the wrong way to describe what had happened, for literally a judgment was passed here. A judgment to bring death upon the order that brought suppression throughout the southern continent. It was enacted by Hayter. As a death council, he had the authority to judge something or someone to their death, though it wouldn't be completely effective against others of his level, and those above him could completely ignore his judgment. The death councils had to judge the dead and guide them to the underworld while the underworld emperor was still alive. The judgment was imposed on reality as Halter appeared before Sylvia in his mythical creature form, the feathered serpent, and the suppression over the Beyonders and all supernatural powers on the southern continent dissolved into oblivion, bringing everything back to normally. As the saints and demigods continued to battle in the ruins, Stivta and Hatter faced off in the dim and dark sky. Halter. Sylvia's voice resounded from the floating judgment scale like a raging tsunami. You and all of your people will pay for what you have done. I doubt that. Hayter merely said, his vertical eyes cold and indifferent, and then immediately he attacked Sylvia, holding nothing back. The feathered serpent let out a roar that pierced Sylvia's spirit body, but she tuned it out with her balance authority, which dispersed it evenly among her surroundings to the point that it was no longer a burden for her to endure. When she felt the darkness around her thicken and richen to form a curtain, she realized she had made a mistake. Hayter's roar, which was actually formed from the language of death that only those Bevenders of the death pathway could detect and understand. He disguised it as a spiritual attack in order to prey to an unknown entity. And, by dispersing his onslaught throughout his surroundings, she had even assisted him in successfully getting a response and wanted to rectify it, but it was too late. The curtain revealed an image of a dark green giant black snake with a bronzed-skinned face, its closed eyes opened, burning with flickering pale flames. The artificial death. At the same time, in Byam, SLA Palenque Eggers floated above the Loan's destroyed navy base, glancing in the direction of Kulain with fretting eyes for a moment before returning her attention to the battles between saints and demigods taking place below, overseeing them. She wasn't assisting her army, she was preparing for someone to arrive, someone as powerful as her. Her senses suddenly tingled, and she looked up, her posture dignified and primed. Stormy and gloomy clouds engulfed the darkness and azure of the firmament in a single heavy moment, obscuring the sky above all of the Rorstad archipelago. Then there came a light that seemed to illuminate the entire sky, followed by catastrophic thunder that slightly shook the city of Byam, spreading fear and awe among everyone. And in the midst of it all, a young man with a dominant and flamboyant demeanor appeared. His blue hair was dark and thick, and he had long carlobes. His azure eyes seemed to constantly suppress lightning and storms within them. Sta immediately recognized him. Harrow Gaunt, an angel of the Lord of Storms. Storms and curses. Harrow Gaunt, an angel of the Lord of Storms. Sia quietly exhaled a sigh of relief. Harrow was an arrogant and ruthless man who believed in absolute power. Likes of him wouldn't bring a powerful sealed artifact to the battle, as they would think it was beneath them. This knowledge calmed her heart. She knew she was about to confront an angel of the Lord of Storms, but what sealed artifact they might carry with them was what truly worried her. After all, despite their negative effects, sealed objects could completely determine the result of the Confi-CT. Nevertheless, she didn't let her guard down, as you should never underestimate an angel. For all she knew, she could be totally wrong with her assumptions. Sia was in for a tough battle, she could feel that, but she wanted to end the coming battle as early as possible, for her task was almost completed. As for Harrow, she only planned on wounding him. As for killing him, she didn't even bother to think about it because the fall of Harrow was guaranteed to attract the attention of the Lord of Storms, which she and her organization couldn't afford. There was also a fact that prompted her to make that decision. the forces of the Church of Storms and Night in Byam were entering the battle commanded by their saints. If the fight did not conclude quickly, her side would be completely disadvantaged. Given all of this, Sia Palenque Eggers didn't hesitate to launch an attack on Harrow, who was clearing his throat in preparation for a pompous proclamation. She assumed her mythical form and spit out a pale white flame towards Harrow, threatening death. Having his proclamation interrupted made Harrow secte in rage, and he responded cataclysmically. He transformed into his mythical creature, a sea creature with tentacles, and aimed his tentacles at the approaching flames. Immediately, bolts of white lightning shot out and collided with the pale flames, cancelling each other out in a horrific explosion. A catastrophic shock wave emerged, threatening to destroy all in its path, but Harrow erased it with his calamity authority, rescuing Byam and all of its people from annihilation. Using his momentary distraction to her advantage, Sia dashed out of the remains of the explosion at Harrow, flapping her feathery oily wings. In order to weaken Harrow, she used her authority to judge him. Harrow, on the other hand, wasn't caught off guard, though his annoyance and wrath were palpable as he felt himself weaken and enfeeble. But he bore it totally with his authority and counter-attacked Sia as her vertical eyes flashed with pale flames, prepared to use her death sight. On him, Harrow unleashed a terrifying and chaotic hurricane that expanded from him as he dashed to Sia. For her, though, his intention was clear as day. Harrow wanted to divert their fight away from Byam in order to avoid collateral damage. But Santa was having none of it. Instead of directing her death sight at Harrow, she directed it at the cyclone, disintegrating it into oblivion as she and Harrow collided amidst tendrils of white lightning and embers of pale fire, all of which lit up the sky in blinding brilliance in the moment of their collision. In the midst of it all, a feathered serpent and a tentacled monstrosity fought each other, just like the mythical beasts. Within moments, they zigzagged throughout the sky, leaving trails of light and nothing but destruction in their wake. But Byam, the city of generosity, remained standing despite clashes of mythical creatures, thanks to the saints of the churches of Storm and Night, who were negating the aftermaths with all of their might, but their defense wasn't powerful enough to stop it completely, causing the entire city to begin to burn and collapse in the midst of a storm of lightning and flame. The cries of despair and grief resounded from the burning city in haunting echoes. Nevertheless, they didn't faze any combatants in the terrifying conflict, though grimness began to seep into their hearts with each passing moment. As they crashed towards Sonia Sea, Sia received a prayer from her force, informing her the task was accomplished, and so she went all out, holding nothing back. She swiftly exited her mythological creature form, surprising Harrow and momentarily freezing him. This was enough of an advantage for Sia to put some distance between them. Immediately after, a necklace appeared around her neck, each of its rubles as red as the blood moon, emanating a decadent aura. Rather than attacking, Harrow also exited his mythical creature form, looking at Sia with a sneer. So that's your hidden card, but do you really think it'll help you with the coming divine punishment? Stay's heart sank. I think you should worry about yourself first, she said sharply. Oh, Sia, how foolish you are. Harrow reprimanded. His aura grew stronger, then he laughed, his laugh booming like a thunderclap, rattling the entire Sonia Sea. You are not the only one holding back, you know. He declared, his form bathed in lightning and waves, as if he had become one with the storm itself. Sia's eyes widened at Harrow, for she felt something arising from within his aura, something otherworldly, something transcendent, something divine. You are right, Harrow concluded her thoughts with a twisted smile, relishing in her shock. I have received the mercy of my Lord. The blessing of the Lord of Storms. Sta didn't even think twice before mentally calling for help in the spiritual network that linked all high-sequence beyonders of the numinous episcopate. Yes, Sia could still fight Harrow in his current state, but as her lord had said, she was not here to fight but to destroy, and her task had been completed, and there was also her force she was in charge of, so she didn't see any appeal in fighting Harrow to the death. Nevertheless, she put on a front, as if she wanted to do just that in order to fool Harrow. She just wanted to buy some time until Hermes arrived to support their escape. Sta took a deep breath, grim determination filling her fiery eyes, and noticing this, Harrow's grin widened, brimming with supreme confidence, but before either of them could make a move, an aura swept past them, freezing them momentarily in their place. An aura so powerful, so eerie, so nihilistic, so cold Sia couldn't be mistaken. Lord, she murmured under her breath, her eyes mirroring the emergence of crimson dark flames. Caesar Bav, West Balam. The initial stage of the assault at Intis Navy Haze was successful, as it had been at all other bases, but things quickly became complicated when Reinette Tinker appeared. This seemed to be the signal that the Rose School of Thought had been waiting for, as they immediately attacked the forces of the numinous episcopate. They temporarily joined hands with survivors of the Intis base. Thankfully, Lukton and his angels had planned a special squad of Beyonders carrying powerful scaled artifacts just to combat the armies of the Indulgence faction, preventing numinous episcopate from falling completely into disadvantage, and there was the Temperance faction in the battle as well. All in all, it was a chaotic and heavy battle, even more so than the ones happening at the other bases. As soon as the two sides engaged in battle, Caesar Bay completely turned into a wasteland engulfed in death and desire. And this was not considering the fight happening between Reinette Tinker and Berjana in the sea. They were both in their mythical creature forms, dolls bound by thrown vines. An ancient bane possessed authority of curse. Their curses might range from something as simple as infecting someone with sickness to something as frightening as inflicting unavoidable death. It was ultimately up to the users and their creativity. Reinette Tinker and Berjana, both ancient banes, weren't short of creativity, slinging not only curses but also jaws at each other. They were both the size of castles and left nothing but devastation in their footsteps. "Remember how you called me a traitor?" Berjana glared at Reinette as he diverted her curse into the surrounding sea, causing it to evaporate instantly. "But look at you now, kneeling to that reaper. At the end of the day, lovely Reinette, we're not that different, are we? Don't lump with the likes of you." Reinette spoke in an emotionless tone, but anyone could feel the rage surfing beneath it. "I still have my soul and my freedom, unlike you, Berjana. You and your inane thinking. I missed that so much, you know. Always gave me the best laughs." Berjana laughed while launching a death curse at Reinette, and as she countered that with her own curse, he continued, a fanatical expression marring his countenance. "Reinette, you still refuse to acknowledge the truth. You say you have freedom. Ridiculous. You and I, as well as all other prisoners like us, are already a part of something bigger, something greater, something cosmic. You should have rejoiced in truth, as I did, rather than pursuing your illusory freedom." His words, fervent yet true, hurt Reinette deeply, searing her soul. So what if it was the truth? I refuse to believe it. I refuse to submit myself to it, she declared, her heart burning with rage and hatred, all of which she channeled into a curse she was silently accumulating for a very, very long time. The root of the curse was the anger, hatred, and grudge that had emerged after she nearly lost everything to the Indulgence faction, and now with her declaration, it had reached perfection. Reinette Tinker opened her mouth, and all light throughout the southern continent dimmed and sank into the embrace of darkness, as if the Evernight goddess herself had turned her attention here. And Berjana felt his senses scream in danger, danger that could claim his life, but he looked unfazed, saying nonchalantly, "Feudal, Reinette. Annihilation." Reinette Tinker cursed, and the darkness around the southern continent converged towards Berjana, emitting a nihilistic aura that all but threatened to annihilate him into nothingness. But before the tsunami of nihilistic darkness could reach Berjana, an arm reached out from the spirit realm, targeting Reinette, who was exhausted and worn from casting the annihilation curse, with the aim of killing. Its surface was flowing with a black, sticky liquid that kept protruding out with strange objects. Some were skulls, while others had barbed mouths and three-dimensional eyes. Abomination Sua, the leader of the Rose School of Thought, in existence at Sequence 1, had been waiting for the right time to assault Reinette Tinker, and when it came, he seized it. And he didn't forget to spare some of his power to weaken the annihilation curse of Reinette to the point where Berjana could face it without dying. Reinette Tinker gazed at Abomination Sua, who was on her tall, without surprise. She expected this, and she even knew what the true intention of Abomination Sua was for coming after her at this moment, and she somewhat felt bitter that he succeeded. A white rose bloomed in the splendor of death between her doll figure and his black sticky arm. A young man materialized right before it, grasping the rose ever so gently. He had bronze skin and a chiseled build. His black hair was short and frizzy, exuding a darkness rivaled only by the void. His eyes were platinum silver, sparkling like the argent moon at night. He wore deep, dark robes embroidered with golden threads. But these were not the most noticeable aspects of him. Rather, 6 pairs of wings with metallic colors unveiled themselves grimly from behind his back. The Reaper. Wrath. As soon as he appeared, the Reaper looked at Abomination Sua's black sticky arm, his stiver eyes shimmering with dreadful light. The arm immediately froze in its path, all of the skulls and barbed tongues, 3-dimensional eyes, and many other twisted things on its surface decaying into ash and dragging it down with them. Reincarnated Tinker, on the other hand, knew Sua was still alive and well somewhere in the spirit world. The purpose of his attack was not to kill her but to drag Lucian out. And the Abomination Sua succeeded. He should personally appear any time now to fight the Reaper. But before anything could happen, Lucian turned and flung the white rose at her. Kill Berjana. His silver eyes reflected her figure as she clutched the rose. Reincarnated Tinker cast a subconscious glance in the direction of Berjana. Her annihilation curse had already reached him, though it didn't turn him into ashes since Sua had weakened it. It was still causing him enormous misery and pain as he tried to nullify its effects on him with all of his power, and from the looks of it, he was succeeding. Then the Queen of Curses looked to Lucian in a bid to give a silent agreement, but he was already gone. It didn't take Hermish to figure out what Lucian was planning. He didn't want to face Stua on the southern continent. After all, if they fought with all their might here, the continent would simply shatter. He most certainly intended to drag Sua away from civilization, and Sua would have no choice but to follow him because even he couldn't stop or disrupt Lucian's teleportation across the spirit world. Finally, Reincarnated grasped the stem of the rose tightly, her bloody eyes fixed on Berjana as she dashed towards him while preparing a death curse with the basis of the white rose, ready to push him into the embrace of death. Berserk Ska. Lucian Eggers emerged amidst the roaring sky and raging ocean. His dignified face was illuminated by the streaks of lightning that slithered through the dark and stormy sky. His figure was bathed in harsh droplets of rain, drenching his hair and dress. Yes, he could have used his powers to stay dry and unaffected by the storms, but he let himself be immersed in chaos and disorder of storms in preparation for what was to come. It would be a lie to say he wasn't nervous. After all, this was his first actual battle. And the fact that what he was going to face was the spawn of an outer god was all the more troubling, but he came prepared. Victory would be his. With that, a sense of serenity bloomed from his heart, smothering all the chaos around him. The roaring sky went silent. The raging sea went still. The stormy clouds went dim. The slithering lightning went away. All of the berserk sea had fallen into the embrace of serenity. But it didn't last long, as something depraved and abysmal emerged from the spirit world. It was a colossal tree drenched with oil. Over the tree, arms are stretched out among other strange things, and black and white eyeballs and wide and dark mouths. Its mere presence began to taint all the living creatures in the vicinity, causing them to sith or break down, suffer a tragic death, or worse, mutate into a mindless monster. Abomination Sua. Lucian took a long breath, slowly exhaling in the final embers of peace. A true abomination, he thought as he took in Abomination Sua's vile visage, his posture becoming dignified and ready for battle. Sua focused on Lucian with all of his eyes. The Reaper, he spoke, his voice gruff and thick from his twisted mouths. I bring my mother's message. Lucian furrowed his brows in surprise, not letting down his guard as he prompted Sua. What exactly is it? You have been bestowed with the highest honor, Sua said, his twisted and distorted figure shuddering with each of his words, as though he were emphasizing them. Mother has chosen you to be her mate. Lucian's face went blank for a second, then he burst out laughing, a twisted laugh full of emotions. Your mother sure has a sense of humor, Sua. His laughter had faded into coldness and apathy. I wonder if she can keep that as I cut her down and purge the cosmos of her filthy existence. Resistance. Sue's voice expressed no rage, but rather disappointment and weariness. I never truly understood that. Mother exists within all. What is the point of resisting something that defines you? He paused as all of his mouths rose to form distorted smiles filled with malice and happiness. Anyway, it is futile, for at the end of the day, nothing can escape the loving embrace of Mother, not even you, Reaper. To be honest, you make a valid point, but you are mistaken about only one thing, Lucian stated frankly as streaks of darkness graced his entire figure, and he raised his hand high to the serene sky. Truly, desire defines everything about us, but desire isn't actually her. A spark of crimson fire sprang in his palm, instantly dispersing and growing to transform into a blood-red sword. The Sword of the Conqueror, a GRADE-0 sealed artifact. The Reaper pointed the bloody sword at the abomination as red fire burst from it, spreading throughout his body, merging and igniting with the darkness, giving birth to a dark crimson flame. She merely holds the authority of desire, he declared as his fiery wings expanded to the sky, sweeping outward. She is not the desire. And the world stood still. In the astral world, amidst an eternal and natural paradise, Lilith sat on the branch of the tree at the edge of her divine kingdom, overlooking the world. She was focused on conflicts happening throughout the southern continent and seas, swinging her legs in thought and consideration. And as Lucian and Sua descended into the Berserk Sea, the Earth Mother could feel it. The opportunity was finally here and they couldn't miss it no matter what, and so she didn't hesitate before willing her voice to resound throughout the astral world within the barrier. Reinforce the barrier, Lilith declared as she unleashed her authorities, controlling them to support the barrier, which caused her divine kingdom to shine like the sun. But other divine kingdoms remained dim, which caused the Earth Mother to fear that they finally let their differences get the best of them. But her worries soon became naught, for every divine kingdom on the broken barrier began to shine like a sun as well. The seven gods reinforced the barrier with their authorities to the point that the influence of the outer gods in the world was beginning to wane drastically. At this moment, a faint echo escaped from the earth, becoming louder and louder as it spread into the astral world. She is not the desire. Oh, no, Lilith whispered, her face becoming visibly pale. Then she immediately braced herself for what was about to come. Roar. A star-chilling roar echoed from behind the barrier. It sounded like an amalgamation of all the blasphemous and depraved sounds in the cosmos, rushing towards the barrier with boundless wrath. Boom. Immediately, something twisted and abysmal crashed against the barrier in fury and indignation, trembling it thoroughly. And the divine kingdoms shook violently along with it, dimming significantly. For a moment, it looked as though everything was about to collapse, but just then, the divine kingdoms began to shine again, even brighter than before, with every authority of the orthodox, gods reinforcing the barrier with all of their might. Lilith gritted her teeth, bearing the cosmic weight of the barrier on herself as blood pounded her ears along with the cataclysmic roars of Mother Tree of Desire. Ultimately, the seven gods held on. A while ago, at the Holy Wind Cathedral, Backland, terrifying storms that were visible to the naked eye suddenly appeared outside of it, and then they surged towards the east in an unimaginable hurricane. Whoosh! The thick, accumulated fog was blown away, and the rich yellow and iron-black colors quickly faded away. Whoosh! The smoke in East Borough and the factory district thinned, and the healthy population felt relieved of their slight discomfort. Boom! Lightning leapt and thunder rumbled in the sky, but they soon subsided, and a downpour began to cleanse the land. The Church of Storms reacted rather quickly this time. Lady Despair walked swiftly through the filthy streets of East Borough, unaffected by the pouring rain. Even though her plans had been ruined in a timely manner, the haze from before had caused more than 20,000 deaths, according to her calculations. Furthermore, there would be a subsequent spread of the plague. With this, I've pretty much digested most of my potion, but this is just a benefit I received as a matter of convenience. With large numbers of the population being wiped out, all this points to the Aurora Order and to the true creator. No one could guess what the royal family really plans on doing. It's time I leave, along with the true creator. Lady Despair was in a good mood. Her whereabouts were kept secret, and she had taken care of everything beforehand, therefore, she didn't have to worry about being surrounded by Rackland's demigods at all. Nevertheless, she was swift about it, for she hadn't forgotten Bernadette Gustave and her annoying clairvoyance. Just as she neared her exit, all of her honed senses screamed in danger, and she didn't hesitate to materialize a sharp and crystalline ice spear by her side. However, the ice spear froze in its path, disintegrating into spokes of light, almost like stars, and from within them, Bernadette Gustave emerged, gazing at Lady Despair. Found you. How? Lady Despair thought. Even if Bernadette had clairvoyance, she couldn't have found her so soon, considering her concealed state. It seemed she underestimated the Queen Mystic. She was no ordinary saint. But as the Sequence 4 Demoness of Despair, she had developed herself one step at a time since she was an assassin. She knew that she couldn't afford to be distracted or spout nonsense at such critical moments. It wasn't too late to think about all these matters later. Therefore, she chose to launch a large-scale attack again and wanted to take the opportunity in the midst of chaos to escape. Lady Despair's figure corrupted with black flames that surged out of her body, spreading ailments in a bid to ignite everything around her and cause massive fire. In the face of this, Bernadette remained calm, lifting her palm to counterattack, but suddenly, her vision clouded, and she saw a figure emerge out of nowhere, producing an aura that froze and rooted both her and Lady Despair in their place. The figure stood in between them. It was blurry and hazy, and the only thing clear in it was the eyes, which seemed to compress the starry night sky. It made one feel at peace, but it also made one feel an uncontrollable fear. Repose. In the face of Lady Despair, Bernadette remained calm, lifting her palm to counterattack, but suddenly, her vision clouded, and she saw a figure emerge out of nowhere, producing an aura that froze and rooted both her and Lady Despair in their place. The figure stood in between them. It was blurry and hazy, and the only thing clear in it was the eyes, which seemed to compress the starry night sky. It made one feel at peace, but it also made one feel an uncontrollable fear. The dark figure approached Lady Despair closely, her divine eyes serenely fixed on the demoness. You are. Lady Despair's horrified voice came to rest. Her entire body was like a sketch that had been quietly erased with an eraser, leaving no trace behind. Her final look was filled with dread and sorrow. The spot where she had previously stood was vacant, as if she had never been there in the first place. The dark figure then turned to Bernadette, who was desperately attempting to prevail over the waves of fear and horror that were attacking her mind and escape immediately, for when she tried to glance at the dark figure with her clairvoyant eyes, a sequence of thoughts screamed through her mind. Don't look. Don't look. You'll die. You'll die if you look. Do not look directly at God. Bernadette felt fear unlike anything she had ever felt before as the dark figure focused on her. Even if she had any questions about who she was dealing with before, they had evaporated now. She was in the presence of the Evernight Goddess. The Evernight Goddess appeared before Bernadette, disregarding her struggles indifferently, then raising her hand towards Bernadette in an attempt to alter her soul. But, before she could, a silver coin in the pocket of Bernadette's frock shimmered and rocketed out towards Evernight Goddess, only stopping when it was right in front of her. It then emitted a pale light that converged and coalesced to form an angelic figure with 6 pairs of metallic wings. All the while, the Evernight Goddess didn't interpret but merely watched serenely. It was as though her true intention for coming after Bernadette was to draw this archangel out. The faint light faded, revealing Lucian Eggers, leader of the numinous episcopate, who had descended on Backland with the anchor provided by the coin. His main body had just surfaced in Caesar Bay to fight Sua, so he wasn't physically present. Rather, he was here as a soul projection, which was one of the abilities that came with his soul authority. Technically, his soul projection was not a clone but rather an extension of himself. Simply put, he could use this power to be in multiple places at once. Lucian unleashed his aura, blanketing Bernadette and completely liberating her from the clutches of the Evernight Goddess. Leave, he remarked to Bernadette, though his gaze never left the hazy figure of the Evernight Goddess. Bernadette wheezed, her hands on her neck, as she kneeled on the ground with a scarlet face, but she forced herself to pull together before making a fall into the spirit world without hesitation. With her departure, Lucian completely focused on the Evernight goddess, hiding his trepidation and apprehension as he assessed the situation. Unlike in the original story, she didn't actually descend through a vessel, so is she personally here. Likely. Is this a projection similar to his own? And judging from her inaction during his descent, her intention from the beginning should have been to confront him. So many questions and assumptions raced through his mind in a fraction of a second, only to be halted by the appearance of someone who calmed his tumultuous emotions. It was none other than the Angel of Imagination. Adam, who had also descended into Bakdund. The Angel of Imagination gave the Evernight goddess a gentle smile. It's been quite a while. Ammonizes, he said warmly, as though he were greeting a friend. The figure of the Evernight goddess became less hazy and more defined, ultimately revealing her appearance. She was an ethereal woman with a veil draped over her face. She wore a black, classical dress, and it was embedded with a starry sheen. A circle of beaming rays surrounded her head. Adam, Ammonses greeted ethereally, but her attention was fixated on Lucian, which was getting on his nerves. Don't worry, Lucian, I am not here to kill you. Isn't that great? Lucian smiled as he asked Adam. Sarcasm. Ammonizes took note, advancing towards Lucian. When confronted with a situation like this, Ammonizes. Adam stepped forward in front of Lucian, confronting the Evernight goddess. Lucian is under my protection. Oh. Adam. Ammonizes murmured, finally focusing on the Angel of Imagination. As sharp as ever. I hate to admit it, but you are always one step ahead of us, even now with Lucian. You were the first to notice his uniqueness. Did she? Lucian's heart sank. You don't know what you are talking about. Adam merely said. Perhaps. Ammonizes spoke ethereally. Perhaps not. But there is one thing I am certain of. She squinted at Lucian. Your fate, Lucton, is peculiar. Nard it thoroughly. You don't want it falling into the claws of misfortune now, do you? She ended with an ethereal smile. Anyone could sense the hidden threat, and Lucian grinned, meeting the divine eyes of the Evernight goddess squarely. If there's one thing I've learned in my life, it's that nothing is fixed. Change claims everything in one way or another, and more often than not, it follows no order or pattern, offering up endless possibilities. In front of it, impossibility and futility mean nothing. He came to a halt in a moment of severe silence. So let's see whose fate falls into whose hands. Big words, but let's see. Ammonizes chuckled at Lucian, then turned to the Angel of Imagination with a smile. See you next time on the battlefield. Adam. Adam nodded gently. The Evernight goddess then turned, her figure fading away just as abruptly as she appeared, returning to her main body in the astral world. Lucian breathed a sigh of relief, his heart pounding against his chest. He was afraid. How could he not be? Considering how terrifying Evernight goddess was, this encounter with her just amounted to cementing that. She actually seemed to have found something about his true existence. Did she? The Reaper turned to the Angel of Imagination for confirmation. Perhaps. Adam looked at Lucian with limpid eyes. You never know with Ammonizes. She is, after all, the mother of Concealment. Nevertheless, even if she uncovers something about your essence, it won't change anything for you. I still have to confront and defeat her in the end. Lucian sighed heavily. Yes, Adam hummed gently. Now go and meet your father. This is the best opportunity. He looked up at the astral world, which had plunged into chaos and disorder with the declaration of the Reaper. The gods are indisposed for the moment because of you. Oh. Lucian raised his brows in surprise. My provocation achieved that much. Can't say I am not surprised. With his declaration, he appeared to have struck a sore spot of the mother tree of desire. Thinking about it further, this did explain her enmity for Mother Goddess of Depravity. Her ultimate goal should be to become the desire rather than simply wield its authority. The Reaper finally nodded to Adam, his figure fading into the hues of the spirit world. Then he was gone, leaving the Angel of Imagination alone in the narrow and deserted street of the East Borough. Adam grasped the silver cross and began to slowly walk outward and along the roads of the East Borough, which were littered with dead bodies here and there. He strode among them while bearing witness to it all silence and repose, giving them his final respects. Culane, East Byam. The curtain revealed an image of a dark green giant black snake with a bronzed skinned face, its closed eyes open, burning with flickering pale flames. The artificial death. Sylvia jerked back in apprehension as the fiery eyes of the artificial death focused on her. Her honed senses were screaming in danger, danger that may end her life, so she went all out, utterly unleashing her balance authority. She aimed to bring balance to the battlefield by harmonizing chaos and order. By doing so, she might grab complete control of the battlefield, dictating all that happened there. At the time, she could simply sever the battlefield from the outside world, breaking the connection that Hatter had established with the artificial death. As she exerted her authority over reality, the battlefield shimmered with bronze light. And the saints and demigods fighting below were immediately perplexed, as their attacks were stronger one minute, weaker the next, then oscillating in between, as if seeking to establish equilibrium. They weren't the only ones impacted, the entire battlefield was affected, even the army of spirits wreaking havoc here and there, who became docile one moment and raging the next. Nevertheless, Hatter remained completely unaffected due to his power and the protection of artificial death. Then they unleashed their attack in sync to disrupt Sylvia's balancing process and kill her altogether. Die, Hatter declared, his voice severe and loud, like a judge passing a judgment. Sylvia Augustus. The eyes of artificial death shimmered with dreadful fire, unleashing the death sight on Sylvia. Both of their attacks bore the intent of killing, combining and merging together to form the fatality of death, which all but wanted to drag Sylvia Augustus into its pale embrace. But Sylvia Augustus resisted with all her might. She even gave up on trying to restore balance to the battlefield and directed her authority at their fatal assault in an attempt to counter it, but it was ultimately futile since she faced a combined attack from an angel and a living uniqueness. And so death claimed her, her body reverting to human form and evaporating bit by bit as she fell down towards the battlefield. And her eyes, which were filled with bitterness, resentment, and a hint of fear, finally dimmed. Ultimately, Sylvia Augustus fell into the embrace of death. Spirit world. Hermes was in his mystical creature form, carrying Sta and her company on his back and fleeing from the battlefield of Bea. Behind them, enraged roars like thunderclaps kept resounding against a backdrop of surging waves. Sia groaned, her body bloodless and pale, trembling and shivering, all thanks to the side effects of the blood necklace. She was lying on the scaly back of Hermes, tended to by her demigods while her saints kept a watch on the surroundings, but just like her, they were battered and bruised. Harrow, Sita managed, her voice hoarse and croaking. Don't, Santa. Hermes chastised. He won't find us. Focus on yourself first. You managed to succeed and hold on, despite the odds. He said soothingly as he entered the dreams of the world, and the roars of thunder and sea faded away into the background. A beam of happiness passed through her heart at the thought of success, but it was quickly crushed when she saw her company, which had been reduced by more than half. Perhaps. Sta whispered wearily. Caesar Bay, West Balam. Reincarnated Tinker walked lightly on the sea, sending ripples along its serene surface. She stopped in front of a doll floating in the water. It was broken and shattered, with its pieces slathered around it all nearly losing their resplendent luster. Why do you stand still? The broken doll whispered through his cracked mouth. Don't tell me your glassy heart is afraid to do the deed. Reincarnated Tinker stared at the broken doll impassively. It's death, isn't it? She asked silently. The thing you truly destre. The broken doll merely smiled a smile that conveyed innumerable stories and emotions, his face crumbling more and more with each passing moment. Goodbye, Barkana. Reincarnated placed the white rose on the caved-in chest of the broken doll. May you finally find repose in death. With her words, the luster of the broken doll extinguished, and his shattered visage evaporated bit by bit under the rays of the sun, becoming ashes that were swept by the winds of the world. All that was left behind was a puppet with broken strings. And a silent tear was shed. Conqueror. Berserk Sea. She is not the desire. Lucian declared, aiming the bloody blade at Sua. His fiery wings were spread out magnificently behind his back, sparring outward as his figure was bathed in crimson dark flames. His aura had changed. It was no longer merely a conflicting blend of grimness and tranquility, there was now a sense of triumph beneath it. A boundless triumph at that, almost as if he wanted to claim everything in the world as his. And nothing could possibly stop him, after all, victory was in his veins. Literally. For he held the sword of the conqueror, forged with victory and conquest. He bore the weight of its terrifying existence and its despotic will, all attempting to triumph over his own, but as it touched his nihilistic self, it became as submissive as a lamb, yielding to his destras. Death was ultimate, after all. With that, Lucian wielded not just soul and decay but also conquest and victory. Lucian exhaled, his gaze was filled with serenity and grimness, and his posture was tense and posed. This essentially meant that he had forced himself to achieve equilibrium in order to hear all of the authorities he wielded within himself and even temporarily be able to unleash them altogether completely. Though a single tip of the pendulum could push him over the edge in this state, he clung on with perseverance. My mother is not the desire. Sua repeated with twisted smiles, his black eyes looming at the fiery form of the Reaper. First resistance, now blasphemy in the face of nothing but kindness. You leave me no option but to put you down for your crimes and offer you to mother, but this form is somewhat unsuitable to do that. He trailed off as his abomination figure began to compress and twist to become a more humanoid figure. However, he wasn't even halfway through his transformation when a flash of fiery light materialized in front of his figure, imbued with the authorities of conquest and decay. It was a sword slash unleashed by Lucian, bearing the sharp intent to disintegrate Sua down to his atoms. But Sua was unfazed, parrying it with his mutation authority. The crimson slash turned black with corruption, falling prey to Sua's whim, who returned it to Lucian. Taking advantage of this moment when Lucian negated his mutated slash, he swiftly completed his transformation. In his stead, there was no longer a twisted creature but a humanoid being fashioned of wood, yet his shape was still bathed in black oil, embedded with all sorts of odd and twisted things. A large black scythe protruded from his hand, generating an unnerving echo. Lucian descended before Sua, flapping his dark crimson fire wings. And they regarded one another in a moment of reckoning silence. There was a reason why both of them chose direct combat. Their authorities restrained each other to some extent. Mutation, constrained, soul, decay, constrained, curse. Even the partial, chained, authority that Sua had due to being the spawn of the mother tree of desire wouldn't be that effective against Lucian, who controlled the authorities of the conqueror. And so they choose to directly confront each other, imbuing their weapons with their authorities to deal the greatest damage possible to one another. The moment of reckoning passed, and the serenity of the Berserk Sea was all but shattered as Lucian and Sua accelerated towards each other at unthinkable speeds. The crimson sword and the black scythe collided with disastrous fury. And the Berserk Sea roared in agony and pain as the destruction was immediately unleashed throughout it. With their first clash, nearly the entire surface of the sea had turned into a mixture of crimson inferno and black tides, with white roses blooming in brilliance in the midst of it all, along with mutated monsters rising here and there. To put it simply, it was chaos. Their authorities were entirely liberated and battled with one another. In an attempt to extinguish each other, the crimson inferno and the black floods collided and raged. White roses and mutant creatures clashed, with some withering and others transforming, either into embraces of death or desire. Nevertheless, most of their power was still in their clash, and all of that was merely the aftermath of their first strike. And the worst part was that they had only just begun. Lucian inhaled deeply, his thoughts flickering with pictures of all his sword training with halter until eventually settling on one, and his body reflexively acting in rhythm with himself in the image, striking towards Sua with his red blade that exploded with catastrophic fire. Sua vertically raised his scythe above him, parrying off the blow of the Reaper, though he didn't escape completely unscathed. Streaks of crimson fire clung to his physique, but he simply snorted, manipulating the black oil on his skin to extinguish them as he raised his scythe to counterattack Lukton. And then their movements became so fast that they practically converted into streaks of crimson and dark lights that blazed through the surging water and roaring sea, colliding and repelling each other along the way. Within moments, the berserk sea and sky above it were filled with streaks of black and scarlet lights, as if someone had sketched the most complicated zigzag formation in reality. Clangs of weapons echoed like thunderclaps, along with authorities, all coming to form a grand and chaotic symphony that left nothing but death and destruction in its wake. The entire berserk sea was gone, literally. It evaporated into nothingness in the face of the battle between the strongest archangels on the planet. And the destruction they wrought would have spread and affected everything if not for the angel of imagination preventing them from doing so. Nevertheless, even if it were contained, a fight happening at this level couldn't be hidden for long. In the whirlwind of chaos and violence, Sua and Lucian keenly felt the gazes being directed here from all around the world, and so they temporarily stopped their clashes, opening up a distance between them. Lucian breathed, his form completely bathed in crimson dark flames, floating in the midst of the seething infernos and fiery lotus that seemed to fill everything. He almost looked like a fire elemental controlling a world of flames. Truly, he looked powerful, but all of this blazing display was merely a protection, burning away the mutation attacks that Sua was constantly sending at him into black embers. Sua, on the other hand, wasn't much better. He was surrounded by waves of black liquid, which brimmed with his authorities. It protected him from the discreet soul attacks of Lucian. Even when not clashing with their weapons, they were attacking each other, looking for an opening to deal a fatal strike. Fatal, indeed, for both of them knew that prolonging this fight wouldn't do any good for either of their interests. Considering the attention of the world slowly shifting to them, it wouldn't be long before someone or something interfered with their fight, and they couldn't afford that. Lucian was the first to make the move, breaking the temporary deadlock between them. He raised his sword high up in the sky, letting it break into a pillar of fire that soared up to the astral world like a pillar of heaven. I, Lucian Eggers, the demon of the end, impose my will on you. Submit to me and purge yourself, the abomination of the world. He declared to Sua as his voice resonated throughout the world but was only perceived and grasped by angels and those above. And each of the syllables in his declaration was imbued with the authorities of conquest and decay, which together imposed themselves on Sua. Sua hadn't let down his guard and prepared to counter it with his partial chained authority, so in face of the declaration, he wasn't caught by surprise, but still, when he faced the will of Lucian, he trembled in astonishment, for it was like the sun, ever burning and unquenchable, unlike anything he had ever seen. And he wavered, only for a moment, but it was all that Lucian needed. His intention from the start was never to make Sua submit to him. It was all a ruse from the beginning to prepare for his actual attack. The demon of the end brought down his burning sword in one fluid motion at Sua. Burn in the flames of Hyle. He proclaimed as the pillar of the dark crimson flames descended, tearing through the black ocean of mutation and melting them completely. Then it submerged Sua in its ruinous embers with a roar that seemed to fill everything. For a moment, all that remained in the berserk sea were the flames. It looked as though Sua had fallen, but Lucian knew better. He knew the spawn of an outer god wouldn't fall so casily and silently. There had to be a catch. There always was. Nevertheless, Lucian was slowly starting to feel the weight of the Conqueror's sword. Even after achieving equilibrium, it seemed that there was a limit to how long he could bear the authorities of the Conqueror. I need to really end this fight as soon as possible. Lucian thought, his sharp and clear to his surroundings, searching for Sua he had evaporated from his senses since his attack. But I fear that's not going to be easy. His fear was proven right, for an aura erupted from throughout the sea of flames that covered the berserk ska, extinguishing them utterly. It was so powerful, so terrifying, so transcendent. If Lucian wanted to put an appropriate word on it, then it would be cosmic. In the face of it, his deepest desires were invoked. He saw himself defeating the Evernight goddess. He saw himself ascending to become the pillar of the cosmos. He saw himself He saw himself standing on the altar of his wedding, looking forward to the bride-to-be. He saw himself sitting with his father, playing chess, and drinking coffee in the twilight. He saw himself traveling the cosmos after Earth couldn't contain his wanderlust. He saw himself attaining peace in his life at last. Everything was already there, achieved and accomplished, waiting for him to claim it all for himself. All Lucian needed to do was grasp it, and everything would be his. Victory. In the face of the cosmic aura, his deepest desires were invoked. He saw himself defeating the Evernight goddess. He saw himself ascending to become the pillar of the cosmos. He saw himself standing on the altar of his wedding, looking forward to the bride-to-be. He saw himself sitting with his father, playing chess, and drinking coffee in the twilight. He saw himself traveling the cosmos after Earth couldn't contain his wanderlust. He saw himself attaining peace in his life at last. Everything was already there, achieved and accomplished, waiting for him to claim it all for himself. All Lucian needed to do was grasp it, and all of it would be his. Yet he turned away from it, grimly walking away. Yes, all of his deepest desires were fulfilled there, but they weren't his. He was still a long way from achieving any of it. That harsh truth persisted in his core as the desire tried to seize control of his mind, soul, and heart. And so he walked away, rejecting the wonderful paradise that awaited him on the other side. With his choice, the perfect world shimmered with unreal light, twisting and shifting in a coalescence of unthinkable images and inconceivable echoes, all coming together to reveal the truth behind it all. What awaited Lucian on the other side was not a perfect world but the abyss of the cosmos, swirling and churning amidst the universe as a whole. It was pitch black, with no ray of light, as though it reflected the darkness that inhabited the hearts of the cosmos. And in the midst of it all was a figure larger than galaxies. It was a twisted wooden mass that protruded mutated flowers, slime-dripping mouths, withering legs, and tentacles. Small creatures are continually spat forth by the monstrosity, which are either consumed into the miasmatic form or escape to some monstrous life elsewhere. Mother Tree of Desire. Lucian faced the Mother Tree of Desire calmly. My will is not that weak to succumb to your illusions. He looked at the dark abyss that contained nothing but depravity and degeneracy and disgust. As I said earlier, you are not the desire, you are simply a pretender created by the original creator. He finished with a snap. Then the cosmos shattered all around him, with the raging roars of Mother Tree of Desire as a backdrop. With that, the demon of the end was back on Earth, floating in the berserk sea amidst a black ocean of mutation, blooming with twisted flowers and dripping with mucus. And Sua floated nearby in his abomination foreign, and above him was a projection of a mummy wrapped in yellowish straps pierced by countless brown tree branches. Chains twisted with thorny veins protruded out from within both of them towards Lucian to chain him, but the crimson-black fire that drenched his figure protected him from them, resulting in a conflict between both of them in an attempt to weaken each other. The intention of Sua was clear as day. He wanted to push Lucian into the loving embrace of his mother. To accomplish this, he did not hesitate to pray to the corrupted chained god and summon his projection. And they attacked Lucian together, using the corruption of the Mother Tree of Desire within both of them. It manifested as twisted chains around Lucian with the intention of invoking his deepest desires under the cosmic aura of the desire, and they wanted to chain his very essence to it all. Ultimately, this would have ended with Lucian being corrupted and controlled by the Mother Tree of Desire. It was a great plan and all, and it would have succeeded if it had been someone else in the place of Lucian. Alas, it was not. Lucian opened his silver eyes, exhaling in the embers of tranquility, though his flames raged in wrath, pouring out from his figure in waves and melting the twisted chains. How? Sua's voice expressed his thorough astonishment and bemusement. How do you still stand in front of my mother? You underestimated me, my will, and my determination. Lucian stated calmly, clutching his sword. Now you shall pay for it. The demon of the end had gathered all of his resolve, determination, and will, then he imposed them on reality throughout the battlefield with his words, and everything in the battlefield shimmered with silver light, submitting to his whims. At this moment, Lucian held control over the reality of their battlefield. He achieved this through the authority of conquest, which was all about conquering everything, even reality itself. He had achieved the true might of the conqueror. He had achieved the true might of the conqueror. Lucian willed the projection of the chained god to dissipate, severing the connection that Sua managed to establish to the battlefield, and of course, Sua tried to stop him after getting out of his shock, but with the advantage of controlling reality itself, he managed to keep him busy for those few moments. As the projection of the chained god faded away, Lucian discreetly breathed a sigh of relief. A major trouble was averted by his swift response, though the surprise and distraction of Sua also helped. Finally, Lucian concentrated on the abomination himself, which thrashed out of the ocean of white roses in wrath and bewilderment. His twisted figure was completely decaying in the embrace of death, but as soon as he got out, he purged away the influences of Lucian with his authorities. You, he hissed. What are you? Me. Lucian chuckled. I have many names and titles, but you can call me Reaper, for I am here to claim your soul. Arrogance. Sua yelled, twisted laughter bursting from each of his mouths. Just because you managed to send the chained god away doesn't mean you've won. Oh, but I have. Lucian grinned as his figure erupted with a catastrophic aura. I should thank you, to be honest. I was actually able to attain the true might of the conqueror thanks to your little attempt to corrupt me. There is nothing you can do now but accept your fate. Sua trembled as the aura passed over him. In the face of it, all of his senses screamed danger, danger that might end his life. Impossible. The abomination thought in astonishment. It was not that he never considered death, but with the existence of his mother backing him, even the gods themselves were helpless to deal with his existence. Oh. Lucian squinted in amusement, seeing through him. You don't really think your mother will save you this time? Of course. Sua wanted to reply vehemently, but he lost his voice because he couldn't connect with his mother. She was still there in the cosmos, but something most likely those wretched gods was blocking him from reaching out to his mother. It was at this moment that Sua realized the cruel truth. This was a trap from the start, but not for Lucian but for himself. He was never going to get out of here alive. He was going to be forever separated from his mother. But Sua would never accept that, he could never accept it, and so he roared and rushed at Lucian with all his might, feigning an intention to battle him to death while trying to find a way out of here. Futile, Lucian stated, looking ahead at the abomination. My declaration still stands. Submit to me, the abomination of the world. Sua froze in his tracks as the familiar declaration was imposed on himself, but it was so much more powerful this time, as though everything was pressing down on his very existence in a bid to make him submit to Lucian. The abomination tried to resist, stirring all of his authorities against the declaration, but when they faced the blazing will of Lucian, they began to waver and flatter, just like his own existence. And he was losing himself, slowly falling into the clutches of the Reaper. No, he was going to escape. He was going to see his mother again. No matter what. Sua actually began to push Lucian's will out of himself, and just as he began to see hope, he abruptly felt all of his instincts screech, but it was too late, since the crimson sword had already pierced through his very existence, all but melting his determination and will into pieces, and immediately, the declaration began to fill the entirety of his being. Such a determination. Such a will. Lucian walked towards Sua, who remained completely frozen. I almost admire you, Sua. He stopped in front of the abomination. If you had kept it going, you would have succeeded and broken my declaration, you might even have had a chance to escape from me. But alas, you are not the hero of this story, nor am one the villain. So this ends now. The demon of the end spoke, his voice severe and harsh, passing his final judgment on Sua. Kill yourself. Sua did as he was told, like a puppet following the command of his master. His figure soon began evaporating bit by bit as the glaring rays of the sun broke through the clouds and illuminated him in blazing brilliance. Mother. In the last embers of his will, he whispered painfully. I am sorry. I failed you. Then the abomination of the world was gone, melting and burning away into ashes, leaving behind a black chain with the thrones that emitted steam under the scorching rays before finally becoming still in serenity. Lucian looked at the ashes sweeping away in the winds in moments of heavy silence, his somber face bathed in the golden rays of the sun. Then he bent down and picked the chain after making certain it was safe, and then he looked up at the sky. The clouds were dissipating, revealing the golden sun, blazing and searing, in the heavens. I need to leave immediately, he thought with trepidation. He was certain that the moment he cut his connection with the sword of the conqueror and exited the stage of equilibrium, the brunt of the fight would come bearing down on him. It wasn't that he wouldn't be able to bear it, nevertheless, it was a moment of weakness that anyone could take advantage of. They might just decide to deal with him and be done with all trouble. For example, the eternal blazing sun. He was certain those were the exact thoughts going through the divine mind of the sun now. Lucian exhaled, looking around the destroyed Berserk Sea for one last time, then frowned, for all that greeted him was a wasteland corrupted by authorities. Something must be done about this, he thought as he began to teleport through the spirit world, or repercussions on the world would be severe. But before he could completely teleport away, the spirit world fell into chaos, and all the knowledge and information in it began to stir and tremble as something colossal emerged from within them. Lucian looked up, his pupils shrinking at the divine sight that greeted him. It was an illusory tower. Every level was made up of thick books. Each book had a brass eye on it. The higher one looked, the darker it became. It was filled with the aura of insanity, destruction, inauspiciousness, and disaster. The tower extended into the sky as though it had encompassed the entire world within itself, including the destroyed Berserk Sea. Immediately following that, all around Lucian, pitch-black stone columns were erected, setting up a majestic cathedral. Inside this cathedral, each column, each arch, and each dome's surface were embedded with the bones of different races. They were densely packed together, protecting Lucian within them. With the appearance of the cathedral, faint thunderclaps began to echo from the infinite heights, and the blazing sun in the high heavens began to shine brighter as well. But even as the cathedral faded away into the dreams of the world, the blazing sun still shone and the faint thunderclaps still resounded, but they ultimately did nothing to stop its disappearance. With that, the illusory tower that encompassed the world emitted an inconceivable light, illuminating everything for a moment before fading away along with the tower into the astral world. The world remained the same. The southern continent was in chaos due to the war between the numinous episcopate and the northern countries, and the northern continent finally took notice of the situation, but it was too late. Nothing appeared to have changed, but the blazing sun shone on the surface of the stormy blue sea between the southern and northern continents said otherwise. It was as if a battle between the strongest archangels had never occurred here. And if one were to put a word to what that illusory tower did, it would be miracle. Corpse Cathedral. Lucian sat on a chair in the cathedral, his crimson sword and the thorny chain beside him. He looked utterly pale and weak, leaning completely back on the chair as he heavily breathed in and out, gazing up at the ceiling with hazy eyes. But as Adam appeared before him, Lucian flashed a big smile at the angel of imagination that said anything but weakness. I told you victory was in my veins, didn't 17. Reunion. Outskirts of Backland, Lowen Kingdom. Klein accepted the creeping hunger from Mr. Azek after questioning him about the circumstances. So, Queen Mystic is Bernadette Gustav. That is an awful coincidence. Ince Zangwill escaped, what a pity. Thinking on this, what is the truth behind this entire event? I have a feeling Bernadette found out, maybe even Mr. Azek too. Azek passed the flesh glove to him and looked like he was about to say something, but something seemed to have captured his attention, making him turn and look in the direction of the Berserk Sea. What happened, Mr. Azek? Klein immediately questioned. Azek, on the other hand, had slipped into a rueful trance. Lucian Eggers, he murmured to himself, his black eyes slowly filling with realization. Lucian Eggers. Who is that? Klein pondered. Could he be related to his musings were cut short by a soothing voice. You called, Father. Klein drew back instinctively, looking ahead in disbelief as someone emerged in front of them. He was a young man with a bronze complexion and a well-chiseled physique. His black hair was short and curly, emitting a darkness only nothingness could match. His eyes were platinum silver and glittered like the argent moon at night. He was dressed in dark robes embroidered with gold threads. But these were not his most noticeable features, rather, 6 pairs of metallic-colored wings emerged grimly from behind his back. An angel. Klein was alarmed and shocked, but he concentrated on the number of wings behind the angel's back. No, an archangel. And did he just refer to Mr. Azek as his father? The archangel in question, most likely Lucian Eggers, focused his silver eyes on Klein, and beneath his gaze, Klein felt stripped, as if all of his secrets were laid bare for the archangel to see and witness, and sweat began to flow down his cheeks. "Leave us, Klein Moretti," Lucian stated bluntly, "and I will overlook the fact that you are still alive." To be honest, Klein wasn't surprised that the archangel had discovered his identity or even the fact that he had been revived, but what truly worried him was whether the gray fog had been discovered by him as well. Thinking about that possibility alone nearly collapsed his clown mask, but he somehow managed to pull himself together and looked at Azek in question and worry. Azek had been fixated on Lucian ever since he emerged, his eyes brimming with a myriad of emotions, but as Klein gazed at him, he said, "It's fine, Klein." He softly nodded. "Leave us." Klein gave Azek one last look but found nothing but acceptance and determination, so he nodded and walked away from them as quickly as he could. Azek and Lucian stood together, watching Klein vanish into the dense woodland towards the backland. "Do you have to spook him like that, son?" Azek asked, finally breaking the silence between them. "I wasn't spooking him." Lucian shrugged, sighed glancing his father. "You know, father, I am the Reaper, and it is my responsibility. He had once escaped from my hands, and I am confident he will do it again." Azek gave a faint smile. "You won't go after him if he really did that, will you?" "Klein Moretti is a very special soul," Lucian said, his gaze somewhere far away. "But he doesn't belong to me." "Who does he belong to, then?" Azek asked quietly. "Mysteries," Lucian revealed, his voice low and faint, almost a whisper in the dark. "Mysteries," Azek repeated, his eyes sweeping with realization once again. "Oh, that answers a lot of questions, but if what you said is true, he's in for a terrible path." Lucian said nothing to that, merely gazing ahead at the foggy backland in repose. "I am sorry," Azek suddenly said, turning and facing his son. Lucian stated quietly. "Don't be. How can you say that?" Azek said ruefully, closing his eyes. "I abandoned you, Lucian." "Father, you did what you had to do." Lucian looked him in the eyes. "I don't blame you for it." Azek felt a sharp pain in his chest. Even though his son said that, it did not alleviate his guilt but rather worsened it. "You already know it," he stated factually. "Yes," Lucian nodded faintly, "I am aware of your problem and the underlying cause. Even I know your true identity, father." He trailed into silence. At that, Azek took a breath, his tense eyes flickering at the metallic wings of his son. "You are an archangel. Son, what have you been through in these years?" "Honestly, father, not as much as you think," Lucian said wryly. "Don't dismiss it all like that." Azek scolded gently. Lucian merely chuckled, gazing forward at the world as the winds rustled his dark hair. "Lucian, look at me," Azek commanded, and Lucian did so, titling his head at his father. "I know that even though I am your father, I might as well be a stranger to you after what I did." "Father," Lucian wanted to argue. "No, son," Azek cut him off abruptly. "I abandoned you, and yes, I had my reasons, but that doesn't change the fact that what I did was wrong. I robbed you of a home and a normal childhood." Lucian pressed his lips into a thin line. "My life wasn't all that bad," he spoke slowly in reminiscence. "There were struggles and hurdles here and there, but what is life without them?" He looked into the eyes of his father. "So, father, please don't you blame yourself. What had happened had happened. Nothing can change that. All we can do is make sure we do right by our mistakes from now on." Azek sighed a heavy and sorrowful sigh. "You've matured into a fine young man. I may have missed out on everything in your life, but at least let me say this, I couldn't be prouder of you, Lucian." Lucian immediately stood still in his place, turning away from his father. "Enough about me now, let's focus on you, father." Azek merely smiled in amusement and ruefulness. Lucian fixed his glare at Azek, making him finally drop his smile. Fine, fine, he still chuckled lightly. But it is great to know that your emotions aren't just a mask. They never were, Father, Lucian admitted silently. Anyway, I am actually here to take you back home. Home. Azek looked at Lucian deeply. Where would that be? The southern continent. Lucian answered. You don't belong here, Father, you never did. The only reason you still walk freely is because you had value to Evernight Goddess, but with me here, not anymore. Evernight Goddess. Azek raised his brows in question and surprise. Have you ever considered why, despite the Church of the Evernight Goddess knowing about your specialness, they never make an effort to capture you and let you always stay one step ahead of them? Lucian inquired, tilting his head at his father. But why? Azek inquired, confused, after a moment of contemplative silence. What am I to a god? Now don't underestimate yourself, Father. Lucian revealed. Your true identity is unique, I mean, truly unique, someone who can change an entire world with their choices. Azek once again fell into a contemplative silence, mulling over the revelation. But, son, you are still not telling me the truth. He ultimately said to Lucian. That's because we are running on short notice. Lucian said, looking up at the golden sun, which was gradually beginning to shine brighter and brighter. I know this is too abrupt, too hasty, but you need to make a choice immediately, Father. Is someone on your tail? Azek asked. Yes, Lucian said, extending his hand to his father. Eternal blazing sun. Azek peered at Lucian but only found somberness and severeness. Then, without hesitation, he grasped his hand, and immediately, they plunged into palettes of colors that were the spirit world. Can you at least tell me what you did to draw the tray of a god? Not a god, but gods. I will tell you everything once we are at home, Father, Lucian said as they zoomed through the spirit realm at unfathomable speeds. Azek hummed compliantly, even though he was still very curious, worried, and vexed about all that had happened to his son. His emotions were a complete jumble, to be honest. But before leaving, we have to pick up someone, Lucian suddenly said, exiting the spirit world along with his father to descend into a carriage on the borders of Intis and Loan. Within the carriage was Bernadette Gustave, who was still trying to recover from all that had happened. The requirements for the ritual of the sage were completed, but she hadn't tried to advance immediately considering her unstable state. There was also the possibility of interference from the hidden sage. Bernadette Gustave. A half-surprised voice sounded before her, prompting her to look up in tension and guard, which reduced as she saw who the intruders were. It was still somewhat surprising to see them together, but considering they were essentially from the same family, it seemed reasonable enough. Lucian extended his other hand to the Queen Mystic. We need to leave, he stated. There is no place for you in the northern continent anymore. What do you mean? Bernadette snapped her weary eyes at the Reaper. Lucian merely pointed at the carriage window, and Bernadette followed him with caution, looking outside the carriage. What caught her attention was the sun, blazing and searing in high heavens, and immediately, her clairvoyant senses revealed to her what could happen next. The blazing sun expanded in her vision until it filled everything. And she closed her eyes, blood seeping out from them, but she ignored that and grabbed Lucian's hand tightly. Then they disappeared from the northern continent, diving into the depths of the spirit world. What about now, son? Azek asked, giving into his worry and curiosity. Bernadette stilled at his words, but she gathered her thoughts to focus on Lucian rather than the fact that the Death Council was the Reaper's father, as she had an intuitive sensation that Lucian's answer would be very important, but if she had to put a precise word on it, it would be epical. She just hoped it would explain why she would attract the attention of the Evernight Goddess and the eternal blazing sun in a single day. I liberated the southern continent. Lucian spoke calmly, as if he were discussing everyday issues. And their reactions were truly a sight to behold. Freedom. Corpse Cathedral. Lucian sat on a chair in the cathedral, his crimson sword and the thorny chain beside him. He looked utterly pale and weak, leaning completely back on the chair as he heavily breathed in and out, gazing up at the ceiling with hazy eyes. But as Adam appeared before him, Lucian flashed a big smile at the angel of imagination that said anything but weakness. I told you victory was in my veins, didn't 17. Adam looked at Lucian with limpid eyes. You are truly an anomaly. Anomaly, you say, can't argue with that. Lucian said in between breaths. But why do you bring that up now? I foresaw your victory, Adam said serenely, sitting next to him. But not in the way you achieved. What changed? Lucian breathed out, curious. You would have defeated Sua, but you won't have enough power to kill him. So, not wanting to waste such a valuable opportunity, the gods would act and finish the job. Adam disclosed. Oh, I see. Lucian took a breath, his hazy eyes slowly becoming clear and bright. The source of change happened when I achieved the true might of the conqueror. Yes. Adam spoke gently, his gaze fixated on the cross at the altar. It is impossible to uncache the true might of authorities from sealed artifacts unless your existence is closely related to the said sealed artifact, which you clearly do not have with the Crimson Sword. I get it, Lucian said. But aren't you forgetting something? The calamity of destruction and the eternal darkness could still have a connection despite my existence. Perhaps, Adam said, his golden eyes gleaming with a sharp light. Perhaps not. Even I am not so sure anymore. There are still too many mysteries out there in the cosmos to uncover. You won't have to wait for long, as you will soon ascend to become the God Almighty, Lucian foretold. Then mysteries will become meaningless in front of you. But, Lucian, your very existence contradicts your words. Adam retorted simply. I know. Lucian sighed a heavy and weary sigh. If there is one thing I learned from my reincarnation, it is that the cosmos is infinite and limitless, encompassing all possibilities and impossibilities. He paused. A fool once said, death is but the next great adventure. Albus Dumbledore. Adam said immediately. So this Karth also had Harry Potter, ch. Lucian raised his brows slowly. Our Earths are completely similar, until the apocalypse, if we only consider the material universe. Adam nodded sagely. I thought as much. Lucian sat up straight and rested his hand on the armrest, a hiss escaping his lips. Anyway, back to Albus Dumbledore. Nothing can deny that man was a fool, but sometimes fools are the ones who can see the truth for what it is. I don't think he was entirely wrong when he remarked, death is but the next great adventure. Fool. Adam whispered under his breath, almost in thought, then he shook his head. We can continue discussing this afterwards. Yeah, let's, Lucian said. After we become pillars. Adam hummed thoughtfully, holding the silver cross. Then he grabbed the sword of the conqueror, examining it. Do you know who this belonged to? He asked rhetorically. Lucian guessed offhandedly, Sauron. Einhorn. Adam corrected, looking at the tip of the crimson sword. He was a true conqueror, despite being a woman in the beginning. Oh. Lucian raised his brows in surprise as he almost heard praise in Adam's tone. Not everyone can end up accepting the gender transition. Adam elaborated, noting his surprise. Look at the demoness pathway, why do you think it is in its current state? You don't mean. Lucian's clear eyes widened. The truth was incredible, but thinking about it, it does explain a lot of twisted things going on and about in the demoness pathway. Yes, Adam confirmed gently. Cheek never fully accepted her transition. Her contradictory feelings about her gender affected the demoness pathway, allowing only men who transitioned into women to progress further. That's fucked up even for a god. Lucian hissed, half in pain and half in incredulity. She should seriously see a psychiatrist at this point. Adam smiled, but he didn't seem to want to delve deeper into the struggles of the primordial demoness. But Einhorn was different, he ultimately accepted what he had become. And that led to glory and victory, but alas, he fell in the end. Under your story, Lucian added with a twitch of his lips. Yes, Adam nodded in pity. It was a necessary sacrifice. Necessary. Lucian mulled over that bitter word. I probably shouldn't bring this up, but you know. I greatly value loyalty and dedication. Adam gestured for him to continue, and so Lucian did. Medici, Red Angel, was your. Laosian corrected himself since Adam was Adam and the ancient sun god was the ancient sun god, both were the same but distinct in essence. Your father's most loyal angel, other than Ouroboros. I even think if he asked Medici to put down his life, he wouldn't hesitate to do so. So if I may ask, why did you do this? He refrained from phrasing it as a betrayal, as he knew Adam enough to know that he must have reason to do this, no matter how callous and heartless that may seem. Adam was silent for a moment, grabbing the silver cross, before saying silently, "After my father's fall, Medici became distraught and devastated. Imagine achieving everything you wanted, only for it all to collapse at the hands of people you considered your sworn brothers. It would do a number on anyone, and Medici was no exception. He was hell-bent on revenge and willing to do anything to achieve it. He got corrupted, didn't he?" Lucian sucked in a breath. "City of Calamity," Adam said, his gaze somewhere far away. "The only way to save him was death, so I granted it." "What a tragic fate." Lucian sighed, placing his chin in his palm. "You needn't feel pity for him. As you know, he is still alive, and he is," Adam paused, gazing at Lucian, "coming for you." "What?" Lucian stilled in his place for a moment, then understood, his gaze flickering to the crimson sword. "When you achieved the true might of the Conqueror, your will resonated with every meander of the Red Priest pathway." Adam gave the crimson sword back to Lucian. Lucian held the sword, looking at it deeply. "Let him come," he breathed out. "I will face him." Adam said nothing to that, looking ahead at the cross at the altar in silence. "Anyway, I feel somewhat better now." Lucian stood up from the chair. "I better go and deal with the fallout." He began walking towards the door of the corpse cathedral. "What do you think Augustus will be doing now? Will he be pulling out his baboon hair in frustration and rage?" he asked offhandedly, stopping in the foyer. "Probably," Adam indulged Lucian without turning back to him. "But not for long. You made your move, now it is time for the gods to make theirs." "I wonder," Lucian whispered, even though he had a good idea what the gods planning to do. Then he was gone, plunging into the dreams of the world, leaving behind a whisper. What they will do. Southern Continent. The fight between the numinous episcopate and Northern Continent militaries has thrown the entire continent into chaos. Even though the battles were limited to the bases, the blows exchanged between angels had an effect on the entire continent, causing mass panic here and there. But the local governments, who had prepared well enough for this situation, immediately acted to bring back order to the continent, but they didn't forget to take advantage of the chaos to deal with the last remnants of northern supporters. As for the military bases, every one of them was either destroyed or occupied by the numinous episcopate. The fighting everywhere began to cease, except in Caesar Bay, where the forces of Rose of the School of Thought were making a desperate last stand after Barcana fell, but it was ultimately futile since Reincarnated Tinker personally entered the battlefield to deal with them. The Queen of Curses kneeled over all the dead bodies of prisoners, and from within them, white roses grew, creating a flower field that filled the entire battlefield. "Teacher," Sharon whispered, standing behind her and placing her hands on her shoulders. She didn't escape the war unscathed. Scars and bruises filled her despite becoming a demigod. Reinette turned to her student, and Sharon froze in shock, for her teacher was smiling, a small and faint smile. "We won, Sharon." She closed her eyes in the embers of serenity. Sua had been slain. Sharon immediately embraced her teacher, their figures bathed in the fainting light of the sun. At the same time, in Kalane, outside the Loan base, Lucian landed, holding the crimson sword and thorny chain. He turned and looked at the restored Berserk Sea. How exactly did the god of knowledge and wisdom achieve this? What authority did he use? He ruminated on the issue until Bernadette and Azek emerged in front of him. Lucian retrieved the soul projection back into him. "Come on," he said to them. "We can't miss this. You have a lot of explaining to do, son." Azek noted as he walked alongside Lucian and Bernadette. "You will understand everything soon," Lucian merely said while they entered the ruined military base where everything was temporarily gathering. With his appearance, the hectic ruins fell silent, and everyone bowed to him in respect and reverence, even the injured, who managed to bow their heads despite their pain and suffering. "Enough," Lucian acknowledged with a faint smile. "Tend to yourself first." And so they did, but still, the hecticness didn't return to the ruins. Lucian strode forward towards the edge of the ruins with Azek and Bernadette in silence. As they reached it, Sta and Hader joined them, all of them looking ahead at the group of nervous and tense mid-sequence Beyonders. They stood atop the rumble while holding a huge flag in their hands, facing the sea. They looked like they were about to raise it, but his appearance interrupted time. "Continue," the Reaper ordered to the mid-sequence Beyonders, who froze in their places before nodding enthusiastically and grabbing the pole of the flag tightly. "Everyone," Lucian declared, capturing the attention of all. "I want to say many things to you in light of what we accomplished, but words can never do justice sometimes, so come on, let's witness the dawn of a new era together." And so, under the eyes of all, the flag was slowly raised by the Beyonders together, its black background with a white rose and strips gleaming brilliantly in the golden rays of sun. It was the new flag of the Balam Empire. A sudden flash of light illuminated the Beyonders, raising the flag, which was immediately followed by a sharp click. A picture was taken. A picture that would go on to be one of the most epical images known to mankind, one that changed the course of the entire history. For, at this moment, the era of colonialism was brought to an end. And the southern continent was liberated. As the flag of the Balam Empire rose and flapped in the winds of the world, every soul on the southern continent could feel something different filling everything around them. It was strangely familiar, something they had yearned for so long, something they were willing to give everything for, and they have finally achieved it. Freedom. And bloody tears were shed from the eyes of the world. Repercussions. The sky over Byam was swept by storms and thunder. Rain poured down over the capital, quenching the fires that had nearly brought it down. Its harsh droplets rained down on the rubble, smothering the cries and sobs of innumerable people. Harrow Gaunt landed on scorched ground, his countenance stormy. "How is the situation?" He addressed his inquiry to Jan Cottam, Archbishop and Saint of the Church of Storms. "Grave, Cardinal Harrow," John Cottam spoke severely. "The base has been completely destroyed, and there are no survivors. They made certain of that. And Byam is in ruins. We're still tallying casualties, but we may estimate more than." He closed his eyes and said, 100,000. Harrow's electric eyes blazed at Cottam. "I was not asking about what happened." He spoke as lightning blazed across the sky, followed by thunderclaps. John Cottam bowed his head completely, his blue hair drenched from the rain. "The resistance is mobilizing as we speak. They want to use turmoil to grab control of the entire archipelago. If nothing is done, it will almost certainly fall into their hands." He reported with a suppressed quiver in his voice. Harrow clenched his jaw. "Hold down the fort for Lowen." "Yes, Cardinal," John Cottam responded swiftly, his head still bowed, not daring to look at that enraged angel. Then he swiftly left amidst the stormy winds to carry out the order. Harrow looked at the sky. "How bad is it?" he asked Ariana, the angel of Concealment, who appeared silently near Hidi. "The southern continent," Ariana said serenely, "is liberated." Harrow Gaunt closed his eyes for a second as lightning streaked across the sky, then opened them bravely. "How could such an operation go undetected until the very end? We have a job to do, Harrow," Ariana said succinctly. "Regardless of the truth," Harrow Gaunt exclaimed exasperatedly. "All right, then. We might as well be done with it. Though I personally think this is a gamble." "Our opinions matters not," Ariana said simply. Harrow Gaunt opened his mouth to retort, but looking at her perpetually inscrutable face, he sighed. "Let's go." Backland, Lowen Kingdom. Audrey walked by the windows, looking at the fog mixed with pale yellow and iron-black colors rapidly dispersing. When she saw the heavy rain that was incompatible with winter, her heart felt more at ease. But there was still a tinge of worry as she headed towards her father's room. She reached for the door, but she froze as she heard whispers from within. "He is gone," Earl Hall said. "It is gone. Everything is gone." Audrey had never heard her father sound so broken and fragile. "Husband, what actually happened?" Caitlin Hall spoke, her concern evident in her voice. "Alfred, the colonies, the bases," Earl Hall said, "all of them, Caitlin." There was a stumble, followed by the sound of a vase breaking, but Audrey wasn't so sure, for she clutched her chest tightly. "Please, Please tell me, Caitlin said, you are jesting. There was only silence, silence so heavy and oppressive that Audrey felt she couldn't breathe, and she ran as the sorrowful screams of her mother rang in her ears, filling everything. It made her heart pound painfully against her chest. Susie followed her, calling to her in worry, but she locked herself within her room and crashed against her door, breaking down in tears. No, Audrey wheezed, resting her back on the door. No, 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 no. Alfred. Her heartbreaking sobbing mirrored that of every mother, daughter, father, brother, and lover who were slowly receiving the news from the southern continent. Forsaken land of gods. My lord. Ouroboros reported silently. He succeeded. The shadows that blanketed him stirred as the voice reverberated throughout them. Give him my offer after his coronation. Yes, my lord. Ouroboros bowed. Medici has returned, the shadows continued hoarsely. And he is going after him. Ouroboros slightly froze at the mention of that name, then nodded impassively. I will see to him. The shadows calmed down, leaving Ouroboros all to himself in reckoning silence. Medici, he whispered under his breath, a touch of emotion blooming in his ever-impassive eyes. As foolish as always. He smiled. Phaenopater. Grace Castia, the ancestor of the Castia family, brooded on her throne. She was an archangel, the hand of order, who had managed to survive the dark T-lines of the Fourth Epoch and even came out on top. Her family was ruling 1/4 of the continent under her order, after all. But even she had to admit that what happened in the past few hours was epical. Something so significant like this hadn't happened since the end of the Fourth Epoch. The southern continent was liberated. She could literally feel it in her senses. The twisted order that the little George established in the East Balam collapsed like a sandcastle hit by waves, and with that, he lost the title of emperor along with any hopes of becoming the Black Emperor. It was almost comical. Castia suppressed a bark of laughter, considering how much effort and work he had put into it, only for it all to go down the drain. However, she knew better than to think it was the end of him. Chaos and disorder would soon take over the world, and George, slimy snake that he was, would completely take advantage of the situation. She wouldn't even be surprised if he managed to survive till the end. There was also a high chance that the gods would make their move in light of all that happened. Whatever that might be, she knew it would push the world into war regardless. War. Her kingdom was unaffected by the Reaper and his organization's onslaught, as they had no colons or oversea military bases. Nevertheless, despite this, she knew that even they couldn't escape what was going to happen. Earth Mother always opted to remain neutral, but with the situation with Reaper, she sure won't continue to maintain her stance. Speaking of the Reaper, he was an Enegana through and through. Castia, despite all her powers, still wasn't sure of the identity of the Reaper, which was enveloped in mysteries. She had her guesses, though, but none were plausible enough. But she was certain about one thing about the Reaper: he was planning on becoming the Death. It was all too obvious for her, and the Reaper was capable enough, unlike the little George. After all, he managed to slay Sua, the abomination of the world, in the Berserk Sea, and even pushed the god of knowledge and wisdom to personally act. All in all, the Reaper's ascension to death was something that the Evernight goddess and the god of combat wouldn't want to see. This would ultimately boil down to the War of Gods, which hadn't happened since the fall of death. Grace felt a headache at that revelation, but she shoved it aside, focusing on the situation at hand. Before her throne stood her descendant, the king of Phaenopater Kingdom, who was waiting for her instructions on how to respond to the situation. Adopt a wait-and-see approach, she decided, tapping the armrest of her throne. Nevertheless, start preparing for war. Is it truly unavoidable? The king said, his voice strained. Great powers are at play here, Henrik Grace said, humming under her breath. Neither I nor you can stop what is to come. She paused in a moment of grimness. Prepare. That's all we can do. The king, Henrik Castia, bowed to Grace. I will see to it. Ancestor. Illiniza, Southern Continent. The headquarters of Numinous Episcopate. Bernadette Gustave hated Lucian Eggers. Because of him, she had to abandon her entire life on the Northern Continent. She was now a fugitive, wanted across the northern continent for assisting and abetting the rebel armies of Balaam. That's what the northern people were calling numinous episcopatch. You could assume this was nothing to her, considering she was the queen of pirates, but these two situations were completely different. When she was the queen of pirates, she could at least freely travel around the northern countries as long as she kept her head down. But now, if she dared to step into the northern continent, she would be immediately besieged by angels of the Orthodox churches. To top it all off, there was a kill-at-sight order on her from Lowen and Intis. Bernadette Gustave sighed, rubbing her temples. To be honest, she knew Lucian wasn't fully to blame for her predicament. After all, it was her choice to accept his blessing and his arrangement, albeit knowing full well that once she did, there was no coming back. And now she was reaping what she had sowed. The queen mystic gazed at the stars adorned in the dark blanket thrown around the world by the Evernight goddess. Her chaotic heart was slowly calming down in the serenity of the night. She was standing on the balcony of the room of the numinous episcopate headquarters that had been temporarily assigned to her. The headquarters, as expected, were cold, bizarre, and drafty, befitting the organization that worshipped the death. Yet even she can't ignore their strange luxuriousness that brought repose to her soul. Death is strange, Bernadette thought as she turned back and began walking towards the bedroom, which was well protected under her enchantments. There was nothing wrong with being cautious. She wanted to get some rest after making all the preparations for her organization, Elemental Dawn, to relocate to the southern continent. She even notified Catalia of her decision, advising her to be cautious and avoid the northern continent as well, notwithstanding the fact that her little girl should already be steering her ship at full speed to the southern continent to locate her. She was unconcerned about this operation as her organization only operated in the seas and colonies. And now that almost all the navy of the northern countries was gone in the assault, this operation was bound to be successful. Even if there were any hindrances, she wouldn't hesitate to personally deal with them. As she brooded on her current situation, she reached for the hand of the door in the balcony, but before she could open it, her senses tingled. Bernadette turned immediately to witness Lucian floating before her balcony, his metallic wings flapping silently in the light of the stars. "May 1st?" he asked in a polite tone. She frowned inwardly, half wondering why he was here and half fretting that the tranquility she had finally attained would be disturbed by his appearance. Nevertheless, her face didn't betray her emotions as she nodded silently, inviting him to sit at the table at the edge of the balcony. "Sorry for dropping in like this," Lucian said as they sat down, his wings melting away into the darkness of night. "It's fine," Bernadette shook her head, her face lit by stars. Lucian hummed. "You look tried." "I am," Bernadette admitted, her impassiveness melting away with his words. Today was just too much for her, so she couldn't bother to continue acting for someone who could see through her facade regardless. "Good," Lucian praised her with a smile on his lips. "What?" Bernadette pressed, unnerved. "As the saying goes, beauty is how we feel on the inside," Lucian said quietly, pointing to his chest. "You should try to follow it." He indicated her heart. "Drop your perpetual mask and express yourself more. For you," he ceased suddenly, as if comprehending what he was about to say next, but he proceeded with a light smile. "Are truly beautiful, then." Bernadette blinked. "Are you flirting with me?" "Oh, I am sorry." Lucian groaned, but his voice was dripping with sarcasm. "Was I that obvious?" "Choices and paths. As the saying goes, beauty is how we feel on the inside," Lucian whispered softly while pointing to his chest. "You should try to follow it." He pointed to her heart. "Drop your perpetual mask and express yourself more. For you," he suddenly paused, as if he were also finally realizing what was about to say next, but he forged on with a light smile. "Are truly beautiful then." Bernadette blinked. "Are you flirting with me?" "Oh, I am sorry." Lucian groaned, but his voice was dripping with sarcasm. "Was I that obvious?" Bernadette blinked again, trying to get her head around what just transpired. She was frozen in her chair, cold wind sweeping her hatter. "Why are you so nonplussed?" Alencian leaned forward in his chair, intrigued. Like a young maiden receiving her first compliment. Bernadette got hold of herself, then retorted sharply. You are a king of angels. So. Lucian shrugged, not bothering to correct her. Just because I am a mythical creature doesn't mean I have lost all of my human desires. Meantime Bernadette elaborated, but was cut off. Oh. Lucian drawled with raised brows, you actually think I am old. Bernadette tempered her tone carefully so as not to appear offensive as she sensed a shift in the atmosphere encompassing them. You are not. Lucian looked at her in the eyes. I am younger than you. He nailed the coffin shut. Bernadette suppressed her gasp as she reclined in her seat. Of course, he was younger than her. She might have noticed it sooner if she had taken a closer look at his silver eyes, which were filled with vigor and youth. Those were not the eyes of someone who had seen the world for all that it was. Lucian smiled brilliantly, relishing her shock. But I meant what I said, Bernadette Gustave, you are truly beautiful without your mask. Bernadette composed herself and looked him in the eyes. I am flattered. She allowed a gentle smile to grow on her lips, and it was genuine, but deep down, she didn't want to encourage him since relationships were the last thing on her mind, much less one with a king of angels. Thankfully, Lucian seemed to pick up on her reservations, much to her relief. Anyway, I am here to discuss your ascension. I am planning on doing it tomorrow, Bernadette said, leaning back in her seat. But there is still something, she hesitated. To be honest, she wanted to ask for Lucien's help with this, but the thought of becoming more indebted to him kept her from approaching him. She didn't really know what he would ask of her in return or whether she would be able to fulfill it. It's hidden sage, isn't it? Lucian narrowed his silver eyes at Bernadette, and she nodded begrudgingly. Then he brooded for a moment before saying, proceed with your ascension. I will deal with hidden sage. Bernadette nodded once more. After all that happened today, she had no doubts about his ability. I am indebted. She uttered those bitter words because she didn't really have any other choice. Don't be. Lucian chuckled. Another angel joining my side for the upcoming war. One couldn't have asked for more. There it is. Bernadette's lips twitched. The price. But she felt a sliver of relief knowing that the price wasn't something beyond her abilities. And her participation in the war was inevitable anyway. Lucian stood up from his chair and said, what do you say, Bernadette Gustave? He extended his hand to her. Bernadette took a breath, shaking his hand with resolve. There was no turning back anymore, so she might as well take a gamble on this path. At least there was hope for finding her father in it. That's the spirit. Lucian smiled warmly. Then he waved his hands, summoning cups of wine in both of their hands. For our future, he said to her. Bernadette raised her glass to him, admiring his ethereal face illuminated by the stars. He was stunning. Nothing could deny that, and they clinked it together, enjoying their wine in harmony. With that, the last of her reservations faded away. This was her path now. She just hoped she wouldn't come to regret her choice today. A short while later, Lucian also stopped by to meet his father. He tensed as soon as he noticed his father reading reports about the assault, even though he was the one who handed them to him at his request. Sit down, son. Azek pointed to the chair in front of him with a touch of weariness in his eyes. Lucian obliged silently, taking a seat in front of his father. Are you done with your duties for the day? Azek asked, gathering the reports on the table and putting them aside. Almost. Lucian shook his head, leaning in on his seat to make himself more comfortable. Enough about me, father, have you gone through the reports? Yes. Azek nodded. So, Lucian drawled. What do you think, son? Azek sighed, seeing through him. You worry too much. I am not going to judge you for this. I am in no position to do that after failing my duties as a father. Father. Lucian began, frowning, but Azek cut him off. And I am sure you have your reasons. I do. Lucian shifted in his seat uncomfortably. But, as you said, having reasons alone cannot justify what I have done. If only I knew you would use my own words against me before. Azek said mirthlessly. Lucian merely smiled, half closing his eyes. So, do you regret it? Azek leaned forward in his seat, noting his uncomfortableness. Oh, no. Lucian shook his head immediately. I don't regret my choice. At all. He came to a halt in a moment of severe silence. It's just that seeing you read those reports and what you might think of them made me feel the gravity of what I did for a moment. Son, Azek said, his tone slow and gentle. If you want to talk about it, I am all cars. Lucian was silent for a moment, then he shook his head once again with heaviness. I am fine, father. He forged forth with a light smile, regaining his spirits. I will adapt. I always have. You needn't worry much, father. Lucian, Azek began, but, seeing his guileless smile, he merely sighed. I understand, son, he said finally. But remember, I am always here. I know. Lucian murmured morosely, his gaze fixed on the fireplace in the corner of the room. But I'm afraid I'm not sure you'll be able to live up to those words. My condition. Azek half closed his eyes, his weary face illuminated by the ember of fire. Lucian refocused on his father. I have a way, father, to stop your cycles of undying and heal you completely, but you must first make a difficult and painful choice. He revealed, his voice low and hushed, just a whisper in the night yet clear as day to Azek. Yet even as the cure was placed in front of him, he found himself hesitant to accept it. Lucian seemed to notice his uncertainty. I am sure in your brief time here, you should have already picked up the clues about your identity, father. He said with a tone of somberness. I have. Azek admitted wryly. For the record, I am uncomfortable with all of their reactions. He took a breather. The way they treat me, the way they look at me, the way they address me, it's like I am higher than all of them. Even your angels were the same. It's almost like I am there. He began to mull over an array of words to find something suitable for his situation. Emperor, Lucian prompted silently. Yes, Emperor. Azek repeatedly nodded, tapping his armrest. Then he suddenly froze, and a look of grim realization dawned on his face. I was their emperor. He leaned forward, his face twisting in place as he clasped it within his palm. Lucian unleashed his soul-soothing aura, calming his father down, and then he tethered the aura to the room as he knew his father was going to need it now more than ever. Azek reclined back in his seat, his face pale and drawn. Who? He said breathlessly. No, what am one, son? Lucian pressed his lips into a thin line, meeting his dark eyes. You are the son of death, a mythical creature born with no humanity. You are an angel of death, the death council that judges the fallen and forsaken. You are the emperor of Balaam, a forgotten legend in the hearts of all. He declared, his voice gentle but reckoning, hammering down the psyche of Azek, slowly awakening the suppressed and forgotten memorts. But before that could happen, Lucian continued with a bright smile. But you are also a father, so responsible and caring to your children. You are a husband, a loving companion to your sweethearts. You are a teacher, the guider of the lights of the world. Lucian. Azek smiled, his countenance casing into serenity. Lucian pressed his lips into a thin line, meeting his dark eyes. You are the son of death, a mythical creature born with no humanity. You are an angel of death, the death council that judges the fallen and forsaken. You are the emperor of Balaam, a forgotten legend in the hearts of all. He declared, his voice gentle but reckoning, hammering down the psyche of Azek, slowly awakening the suppressed and forgotten memories. But before that could happen, Lucian continued with a bright smile. But you are also a father, so responsible and caring to your children. You are a husband, a loving companion to your sweethearts. You are a teacher, the guider of the lights of the world. Lucian. Azek smiled, his countenance easing into serenity. Lucian continued on, matching his smile. You are a scholar and a historian, bearing secrets and knowledge of the gods. You are a soldier, with blood and Tron in your heart. Ultimately, father, you are also a human. He paused. You are everything I said and much more. I want you to remember all of this before you make the choice. Azek was silent, and Lucian patiently waited, gazing up at the stars through the window, his wavy hair swaying in the dark breeze of night. What are my choices, son? Azek asked, taking a deep breath in resolution. Lukton smiled, hearing his father, but it faded as he noticed his dark eyes, which still hide his weariness, exhaustion, and pain, so he shook his head at Azek. Not now, think about everything carefully and ask me that again when you are truly ready. Azek didn't bother to put up any fronts, rather, he reclined in his seat, nodding to Lucian with a heavy sigh. I will leave you to it then. Lucian stood up from his chair and walked towards the door, but as he touched the doorknob, he spoke silently, looking up at the ceiling. I am sorry, father, for doing this, forcing you to make a choice. Don't be, son, Azek shook his head. I think it's about time I face my past rather than running away from it. Lucian stayed in the foyer for a moment before exiting the room, leaving behind only a whisper. Good night, father. See you at the council tomorrow. Council. December 29, 1349. As the rays of dawn graced the world, Lucian Eggers entered the main chamber of the headquarters of the numinous episcopate. He wore a black robe embroidered with golden threads, the dress reserved for southern royalty. His black hair has become voluminous and wavy, reaching his shoulders. His silver eyes were sharp and clear, observing his audience. The main chamber was lifted by black gold pillars that wove higher and higher to support a dome ringed by stained windows, and behind them was the melting night, handing its last light into the chambers. In middle of it all was the painted table, which was graced by the angels Reinette, Sia, Halter, Hermes, and last but not least, Azek Eggers. And surrounding the painted table were chairs, neatly arranged, in which the saints and demigods were present, as was Bernadette, seated quietly in the corner. Every high-sequence Beander involved in the assault was summoned to the council that would decide the fate of the southern continent, and all attended, presenting their finest selves, given the historic nature of the occasion. With the entrance of Lucian, everyone stood up from their seats in unison, most out of reverence and respect, some out of acknowledgement and appreciation, and a few out of warmth and kindliness. Lucian nodded to everyone as he marched into his main seat at the painted table, then peered around. Before we begin, a moment of silence for those we lost yesterday. A somber silence filled the hall as everyone paid their respects in their hearts for their fallen comrades, praying for their safe journey to the afterlife. The moment passed, and Lucian declared silently, his silver eyes shining with light. May their souls attain eternal rest. May their names be engraved in the annals of history. May they find repose and peace in the underworld. Everyone lowered their heads one last time before taking their seats alongside Lucian, their faces heavy with emotion. Then, as the somber atmosphere waned into dignity, Lucian placed an array of newspapers on the table. They were the famous papers in different regions of the world, and all of these diverse papers in different languages now shared a single similarity. It was their front page, with a photograph of the Beyonders raising the new Balam flag on the ruins of colonialism. It was such a significant and iconic image that when Hayter released it to the public, it spread like wildfire over the world, with all newspaper businesses making overnight changes to incorporate this image on the front page. Though the images were the same, the context of the news varied completely from one newspaper to another, filled with propaganda, opinions, and stories. And the majority of them were vehemently opposed to numinous episcopate. Some even took it a step further, demonizing them and their cause. They were all successful in swaying the public opinion of the northern continent against the numinous episcopate as soon as the news got out. This came as little surprise to those gathering for the council, given that they had left Byam in ruins with countless dead. Nonetheless, reading the demeaning and degrading titles slapped on them and their cause made them feel somewhat uncomfortable. Lucian took note of it all. Don't let this get to you, he remarked, pointing at the newspapers. They can call us whatever names and slurs they want, demons, slaves, apes, lowers, it will make no difference in the coming war. He paused, looking around. Always remember, history is written by victors. The uncomfortableness in the chambers waned away like embers, leaving nothing but tension behind as they understood the underlying meaning of his adage. Lucian continued, leaning forward in his seat as the tension grew in the air. We have achieved freedom and liberation from centuries of oppression, but the times ahead of us are even darker than the past. He paused, then went on. Each of his words was punctured with grandeur and gravity. Never forget, we are not facing Loan or Intis or any of other northern countries, but the gods who stand behind them, the 7 Orthodox gods. They are the ones who shaped the order of the current civilization, which we are up against. So tell me, do you still want to take this wretched path with me? The Silent One asked his people, meeting everyone in their firm and resolute eyes. Good, nothing short of what I expected. Nay nodded, not being stingy with his praise. He sure seems passionate. Bernadette shifted in her seat as she ruminated. But, in light of what had happened the day before, the parliaments of Lowen and Intis should also be convening now, and whenever she thought about this, her clairvoyant senses were tinged with a foreboding. Something horrible is about to happen. The Queen Mystic could feel it in her bones. But she temporarily suppressed her uncomfortable nerves, electing to refocus on Lucian. But victory isn't going to be easy, especially in the coming World War. Lucian said, his voice carrying a sharp edge. There are still a lot of issues that need to be addressed in our home before we can think about that. Ifis' gaze flicked to Sia. First and foremost, the resurrection of the Balam Empire. Sia stood up from her seat, taking over from her lord. The Balam Empire, she said, clearing her throat, capturing the attention of all, was collapsed and divided after the fall of the Underworld Emperor at the hands of the Seven Gods. The shards of what remained of our glorious empire were seized by various powers, plunging the continent into millennia of anarchy until the arrival of the Northerners. They took advantage of anarchy to colonize us, yet even they couldn't completely extinguish it, they just regulated it. Her tone took a turn into somberness. Even now, after we liberated the southern continent, the anarchy still persists, but we can't afford that if we are to resurrect the Balam Empire, Sia continued, looking between Lucian and Hayter. In light of all of this, we have decided to have a succession ceremony tomorrow in Selkith Palace in Kalain. Every power, either extraordinary or ordinary, of the southern continent will be summoned to swear their fealty to our Lord. My lady, what about those that deny the ceremony or are absent for the ceremony? Michelle, a demigod of the numinous episcopate, asked the question that was on most minds. They will be deemed traitors of the empire. Sta sobbed severely. They shall be judged with capital punishment, she continued, looking around everyone. If there is any resistance, we will purge them. The council swayed in approval, nodding in concurrence with their words, especially the last. Reinette Tinker nodded along with them. She knew even she and her faction would be summoned to swear their fealty to Lucian tomorrow, and refusing wasn't really an option as much as she desired freedom. It was part of her deal with Lucian, after all. Honestly, it would be a lie to say she hadn't thought about backing out of the deal despite the dangers, but with all that happened yesterday, that wasn't really much of an option anymore. As much as she hated admitting it, her faction needed Lucian to survive until they could stand on their own. Sacrifices have to be made if you want to tread further on your path. It was an eternal law of the cosmos. There was also the fact that Lucian possessed the characteristic of Sua. She needed that to ascend farther along her path in order to attain her dream, which was always to become above the sequence of Chatnid and Abyss pathways and slay the mother tree of desire. A ridiculous dream, to be honest, but hey, what are dreams if they are not ridiculous? I will grant each of you summons as soon as the council is over, send them across the southern continent through your messengers to those designated. Sia ordered, to which everyone nodded in compliance. And ensure their timely arrival in Kalain for the succession ceremony tomorrow, she ended, handing the conversation over to Hayter. As Santa sat back down in her seat, Hatter began. The next thing on our agenda is the coronation. It will be held after the succession ceremony on the dawn of the new year. It will also be held in Kalain's Selkith Palace, which will become the royal castle, and the city will become the capital of the Balam Empire. He declared, the coronation is going to be a big event, unlike the succession ceremony. All of our people will be taking part in it, either through ordinary or extraordinary means. So it is. Hermes inwardly sighed. His guesses were proven correct. This whole succession coronation event was actually an ascension ritual for Lucian to become the Pale Emperor. This wouldn't have elicited much surprise from him if it weren't for the fact that his student was already an archangel. From the looks of it, Adam seemed to place extreme importance on him. He was taken aback when the Angel of Imagination directly asked him to tutor Lucian, but he knew Adam typically takes an interest in those who become notable individuals who can change the course of history. And given that Lucian was surrounded by mystery and secrets from the very beginning, he definitely fulfilled the role of being a key player in the gamble that was history. But it was still unusual for Adam to place such significance on someone, even that foolish kid. Russell did not receive such treatment from him. Hermes didn't have to wait for long, he soon found out why. His student, after all, literally changed the entire world in a single day. Destiny was on his side, Hermes could at least tell that, but still, nothing could deny that his student was an enigma. He just pondered if he could grow to be a star that would shine eternally in the heavens or if he would burn and explode in the process like his countless predecessors. He just pondered if he could grow to be a star that would shine eternally in the heavens or if he would burn and explode in the process like his countless predecessors. Halter continued. About the coronation, there is still much to be discussed and finalized. He swept his gaze at the high sequence beyonders of numinous episcopate, ordering. So come to my chambers after you are done with summons. Thank you, Hater. Lucian said. You may sit down. Yes, my lord. Hater nodded, returning to his seat. Lucian peered at all in serenity. The next issue is empire governance. He stated. Yes, I will be emperor, but even I cannot be perfect in everything, so I am forming a council of advisors who can help me in ruling the empire. The Royal Council. Breaker of order. The next issue is empire governance. Lucian stated. Yes, I will be emperor, but even I cannot be perfect in everything, so I am forming a council of advisors who can help me in ruling the empire. The Royal Council. A ripple of surprise spread throughout the chamber in the face of the unexpected news. Historically, the Underworld Emperor had counselors to help him in his reign. In some cases, they even ruled the empire indirectly during his absence. But the Underworld Emperor never acknowledged them like Lucian as a separate legislative body, granting immense political power to the members. The seats of the Royal Council will be filled by saints and angels. Lucian continued, his voice growing solemn and dignified with each word. The positions are the Lord of Coins, who will be Chief Treasurer. They will oversee the economy and finance of the empire. The Lord of Whisperers, who will be Chief Intelligence Advisor. They will oversee the intelligence sector of the empire, protecting it from shadows. The Lord of Information, who will be Chief Communication Advisor. They will oversee the media, image, and relations of the empire. The Lord of Order, the Chief Legal Advisor. They will oversee the laws and rules of the empire. The Lord of War, who will be Chief Military Advisor. They will oversee the army, navy, and air force of the empire. The Lord of Faith, the Chief Spiritual Advisor. They will oversee the beliefs of the empire. The Hand of the Emperor, the Chief Advisor. They will oversee the empire itself. And last but not least, the Emperor himself, who is the leader of the Royal Council. He will rule the empire. A reckoning silence fell over the council, each in their own thoughts, though a visible excitement flashed past the eyes of each saint. This was a golden opportunity. Political power may not hold much importance when compared to extraordinary power, but it was still very substantial in the current order of civilization. This would be even more so with the resurrection of the Biome Empire, where the concept of hierarchy was held in very high regard. So, how could they not be excited? Lucian took note of all of their reactions. I will personally select and appoint all the seats of the Royal Council right after my coronation, under the witness of the Biome Empire. At his words, a veil of tension fell over the hall. The fact that the Reaper himself would be selecting the members of the council just put a lot of weight on their shoulders. Lucian took a moment of silence, allowing them to digest the information. Moving on, the beliefs of the seven gods. Bernadette Gustave, who had been impressed by the Royal Council to the point where she began to analyze and infer about the underlying tasks and responsibilities each seat would possess, got distracted by his remarks. Don't tell me he is going to, she thought, suppressing her rising shock. Their faiths will be considered unorthodox within the empire. Lucian proclaimed, a grin on his lips. Thus, the seven orthodox gods will be deemed evil gods in the Biome Empire. What followed his proclamation was a pin-drop silence as the entire chamber was frozen in shock except for the angels, but even they looked somewhat uncomfortable at his words. How could they not be? If his proclamation were enacted, it would cause an uproar all around the world, no less than the one that was caused by the assault. After all, the faiths of the Seven were one of the most significant components of current civilization, if not the most important. From the beginning, people were taught that there were only 7 orthodox gods and that all other gods were evil and wicked. The current society was based on that concept. Millennia of indoctrination had etched it into the very soul of humanity, to the point where people were unconsciously distrustful and terrified of any deity other than the 7 gods, but to them, they would subconsciously begin to give their faith, their trust, their soul, and in the end, everything. It could even be considered the order of civilization itself. Lucian wasn't jesting when he said they were going up against the order of civilization. He meant it literally. And he knew that by doing this, he would be pouring oil into an already raging fire. But did he care? No, not at all. After all, it wasn't only his people who were labeled with names and slurs. Even he himself didn't escape their defamation. The 7 Orthodox churches made a joint declaration that deemed him an evil god. Lucian wanted to give the 7 gods and their countries a taste of their own medicine, and his grin widened at that thought. He is enjoying this. Bernadette recoiled in her seat, her gaze flickering at his grin. She was still reeling from the shock of his terrifying proclamation. Even though she hadn't been particularly faithful to any of the 7 Orthodox gods, hearing them described as evil gods still shook her heart. She could already imagine the repercussions. The zealous believers would go mad in rage at the blasphemy against their gods, especially the Inquisition of the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun. She wouldn't even be surprised if they decided to launch a crusade on the southern continent. Bernadette looked around the chamber. She could literally feel shock and discomfort coursing through the air, but as she expected, nobody spoke up against the proclamation in the end. There was no point, the Queen Mystic knew it. The situation had already deteriorated to the point where adding more fuel to the fire didn't really matter. All the bridges that could be burned had already been burned. It will be enacted after my coronation, Lucian continued contentedly, his silver gaze sweeping his silent and grim council. Oh gods, this war is going to be hell on earth. Bernadette thought gloomily, reclining in her seat. Next, Lucian said, moving on to the next issue, melting the atmosphere in the hall. The status of extraordinary. He really is going all out, isn't he? Hermes thought, suppressing the twitch of his lips. Even Russell was not this audacious when he tried to oppose the 7 gods in his years of madness. Perhaps Aemon had found his successor. In retrospect, labeling the 7 deities as evil gods would not trigger a strong retaliation from them. Expect the Lord of Storms, the Eternal Blazing Sun, and possibly the God of Combat, as something similar occurred in the 4th epic. In the Solomon Empire, the 6 gods were deemed evil deities by the Black Emperor. At the time, the distinction between gods as orthodox and unorthodox wore thin, and towards the middle of the 4th epic, it didn't really matter. Either way, the coming war was bound to get worse with the way his student handled things, but he couldn't really blame Lukton, as in this situation, there was no right or wrong. All that mattered was victory. By the end of the 4th epic, Lucian continued, elaborating on the status of extraordinary. The extraordinary withdrew from the stage of the world. There was a flash of surprise on the faces of everyone who didn't know much about the society of the 4th epic, where the extraordinary and ordinary were integrated seamlessly into the civilization thanks to the efforts of the Black Emperor and the Night Emperor. It was a decision made by the 7 gods to reduce the number of Beyonders in the world and limit the existence of the extraordinary in order to give the world time to heal from the devastation that was the War of 4 Emperors. Oh, Bernadette thought in realization, her brows raising to her hairline. But I have a feeling that there is more to this. Since then, Beyonders have disappeared from the public eye, only operating from the shadows of the world, but not anymore. As the apocalypse nears, the secrecy will be harder and harder to hold from the public, so in the Balaam Empire, the existence of the extraordinary will be slowly revealed, step by step, to let the people accept it eventually as a norm of our civilization. Again, the apocalypse. Bernadette thought with gloom, and her mood mirrored everyone else's. There was also an undercurrent of curiosity. as if they were wondering how exactly the apocalypse would result in the ultimate exposure of the extraordinary. Lucian, Hermes suddenly spoke up, capturing the attention of all. To him, the mysterious angel in the assault. You don't mean to bring back the order of the fourth epoch? Yes, teacher, at least in form. Lucian nodded. The Beyonders are the core part of civilization in either epochs. So I think it is better to properly recognize and integrate them into the empire. Hermes hummed, reclining in his seat in silence. Did the Reaper just address the mysterious angel as his teacher? Sharon thought, her glassy eyes subconsciously shifting to her teacher, who was as impassive as always. Just who is he? Maybe teacher knows. The appointed Lord of Information will lead this endeavor. Lucian decided, ending the issue. Further details will be issued afterwards. Then the council continued on. With the major issues over, the minor issues were brought up by Sia and Hader in turn. It was all about the conception of the Balaam Empire, of its sectors and districts, of its lower positions and seats, and so on. They used the map of the southern continent to illustrate their declarations. Bernadette had tuned them out by then, her mind flying with thoughts about Lucian, the mysterious angel, and the World War, but it was truly well thought out considering how little time they had to plan and decide. She was engrossed in her thoughts until a white owl emerged into the chamber, interrupting not only her but also the council. Lucian raised his hand, allowing Merlin to land on his arms, and then his messenger told him the dire news he had awaited. Everyone, he said, meeting the curious and inquisitive eyes of all, the council is temporarily halted. We have a situation. He delved into the spiritual connection that Merlin carried with another spirit, which was currently possessing an insignificant parliament member of Loan, then extracted and displayed it before the council. Above the painted table, a flickering projection revealed the image of Loan's parliament, with all of its seats occupied by its members. In the middle of it all walked a man with a grave face and an old-fashioned mustache. He was wearing opulent robes, bearing the coat of arms of the Augustus family. He was followed by an ascetic woman dressed in a black hooded robe and a stern man, dressed in a flamboyant dark blue robe. George Augustus III is addressing his parliament. Lucian declared, his gaze fixed on the variation of spiritual projection, admiring his creation. He wasn't concerned about his prying being discovered because what was about to happen wasn't really a hidden event. A lot of eyes from all over the world should be turning here already. If his predictions were correct, George would appreciate all the attention, especially his own. Bernadette looked at the projection, her heart thumping painfully against her chest. She knew it now. The cause of her terrifying foreboding wasn't Lucian or any of his declarations. It was George Augustus III, the King of Loan. Vengeance. December 29, 1349. Backland, Loan Kingdom. The city of cities looked dim and wan, mirroring the eyes of its residents. Even the brilliant rays of the sun didn't seem to be able to melt the gloomy veil draping the city. It was as though the city was losing something precious, something valuable, something invaluable. Hope, it was. That fickle yet constant struggle against the trend of times was receding from Backland like a tide, leaving nothing but despair and death in the wake of the events of yesterday. The great smog of Backland. At noon yesterday, a deadly yellow cloud of smog and pollution began to spread from the East Borough to the rest of the city. All those that came into direct contact with it died like falling trees, while those that had indirect contact with it were infected with a fatal plague. Although the spell singer of God created a hurricane that blew the smog away before it could spread throughout the Backland, there were still grave consequences. According to preliminary estimates, a total of over 21,000 people died while the subsequent plague was still claiming lives. But even such an event paled in comparison when the news of what happened on the southern continent and seas hit the city like a tyrannical bolt from the Iord of storms. The rebel armies of Balaam attacked and destroyed the military bases of Loan and Intis in the colonies and the seas, leaving no survivors. Even the colonial governments had to fall under their control. Ultimately, they had liberated the southern continent from colonialism. That was the official declaration issued unanimously by the governments of the northern countries. Anyone with a brain could tell that there was more to this, such as how measly rebels managed to destroy some of the world's strongest bases, how such a coordinated and well-planned operation went unnoticed until it was too late. Who exactly were these rebels, and how did they become so powerful? Was it because they believed in a new evil god, the Reaper? And so on and on. There were too many mysteries and unknowns to unravel for those curious and wondrous minds, but they had little to no time for them in the face of the trend of the times that were like storms sweeping the northern continent. It would be an understatement to call what followed after that devastating. The losses were astronomical. The death toll was heavy, far outweighing the initial estimates, with most lives lost in the city of Bayarm. As for the material losses, it was all the more ruinous. The destruction of a major part of their military as well as the loss of their colonies caused the economies of Loan and Intis to be left in shambles overnight. Both of the countries were heavily dependent on their colonies, so losing them had a drastic effect on them. And the dreadful fact was that people had just begun to face the repercussions, but once they completely settled down, true hell would descend on the world. The first signs of its arrival were already emerging in the parliament of the Loan Kingdom. All of its members were gathering in light of what happened to debate and decide their response. The parliament was located near the center of Bakhind. It was a majestic and grand structure, embodying the wealth and power of Loan. Its broad and guarded entryway was swarmed by throngs of reporters, trying to soak up every bit of information from the members of parliament who were arriving in their carriages for the historic occasion. But all fell silent as the last carriages arrived at the parliament bearing the emblem of the royal family, and from one in the middle, George Augustus III emerged, draped in his opulent robes. Flashes of light swept him along with fervorous queries as soon as he stepped out. But the King of Loan merely nodded in answer to reporters, traipsing off with his escorts into the parliament. He was soon joined by Ariana, the angel of concealment, and Harrow, the angel of calamity. They entered the assembled legislature together, in full view of everyone. Hushed whispers arose around the parliament chamber, most about his imminent address, some concerning the identity of the ascetic woman and strenuous man trailing him, while the rest kept their grim silence, all following them as they reached the center podium. George Augustus III ascended to the podium, standing before the array of microphones as flashes of camera light swept through his figure along with expanding whispers, but he merely raised his hand, making the legislative chamber fall into a pin-drop silence. And all of the eyes were turning to focus on him. It came not only from the parliament but from everywhere: Intis, Fasak, Fainapotter, Lindbergh, Masin, Balam, and even the astral world. Under the attention of the world and gods, the King of Loan cleared his throat and began by acknowledging the legislative members regally. Mr. Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, and members of the House of Commons and Lords. George Augustus III paused, looking back at the eyes focusing on him from the world levelly as a reckoning silence filled the expanse, then he shattered it grimly. Yesterday, December 28, 1349, a date that will live in infamy, the kingdom of Loan was suddenly attacked by rebel forces of the Empire of Balam. It will be recorded that the attack was premeditated for many days or even weeks. During the intervening time, the rebels have managed to deceive and blindside us from the threat they posed. The legislative members watched on in indignation. They have been shamed. Their reputation as the most powerful country in the world was put to question after what happened. Their attack on the overseas and colonial bases of Loan Kingdom has almost crippled our military and naval forces. And the colonial government of East Balam has unanimously surrendered to them. The King of Loan met the eyes of all gravely. I regret to tell you that over 500,000 lives were lost yesterday. The parliament erupted in an uproar. Even though they expected the losses to be astronomical, hearing them directly still shook their hearts. Such a large number of lives lost in a single day hadn't ever happened in recorded history. Many members felt faint as they thought about what this ultimately implied for them, their families, and their kingdom. Silence. Mr. Speaker banged his gavel heavily, but it wasn't enough to suppress the chaos that descended on the parliament. Silence. He banged his gavel again. Everyone. George Augustus III intervened, looking at the chaotic chambers. Then, all their chaos moved to his tune, spinning and weaving into a twisted harmony. Immediately, the members of parliament went silent, returning to their seats and regaining their focus on their king, though there was an intensity to their eyes that hadn't been there before. An intensity that the king of Lowen knew all about. He had seen it countless times among the slaves working in his mausoleums. It was a desire deeply rooted in the hearts of humanity. Vengeance. George Augustus III smiled in his heart as he continued with his epical address. The rebels of Balaam pose an immense threat not only to our nation but to the current order of civilization itself. They intend to destroy everything that our forefathers fought so hard to create. The intensity in everyone's eyes grew with each of his words, capering and dancing to his twisted tune of vengeance. We cannot allow that, but if the events of yesterday were anything to go by, then the rebels are unlike anything we have ever faced. No amount of debate and decisions here will amount to anything when we make first contact with our enemy. Instead of shouts of outrage at the blatant disregard from their own king, the members of parliament remained in silent resignation. It had become obvious to the wisest of them that their king had a hidden agenda and was taking advantage of this situation to push and implement it, though even after realizing this, they ultimately raised no objections. It was not that they didn't want to, but they couldn't in the face of their king, who was uttering such cold and hard facts that left no room for opposition at all. Maybe he was deceiving them into following his will, twisting and distorting the facts to make them dance to his tune like puppets, but even if they knew this, what could they do other than dance along? The truth is the best form of deception, after all, Earl Hall thought, looking at his king, then closed his eyes for a moment before opening them, the intensity burning brighter than ever. Alfred. The facts of yesterday speak for themselves. This new enemy is no longer a factor that we can face through conventional and traditional means. We are entering unfamiliar territory, so now more than ever, we must unite behind a single front, a single person, who can guide us to victory. The King of Lowen proclaimed, each of his words punctured with a regulatie, all coming together to bore on the parliament. And they responded, standing up one by one from their seats with grimness. On cue, Ariana and Harrow emerged from behind George Augustus III, taking out dark and blue specters covered in diamonds, rubies, and sapphires, all shining with a divine light, from within their robes. As soon as they were revealed, the world held its breath, for those were the famous divine specters. It embodied God's authority on earth, enabling its wielder to convey and represent the will of the gods. Under watchful eyes, the King of Lowen extended his hand and humbly received the divine specters from the angels. Following that, his escort brought out his crown and regal cloak, which Ariana and Harrow placed over him in acknowledgement. Then George Augustus III turned and faced the world, declaring for all to witness and behold. I believe that I, George Augustus III, the Emperor of Lowen, interpret the will of the divine, of the legislative, and of the people when I declare that the parliament is permanently dissolved and the Lowen kingdom is reconstituted into an empire, so help me God. Immediately, the members of parliament, who had all stood up, bowed to George Augustus III in acknowledgement. They chanted together in twisted harmony. God save the Emperor! God save the Emperor! God save the Emperor! Flashes of camera lights filled the chambers of parliament, capturing the epical moment. And underneath it all was a faint rustling from a flipping book, but when a hand holding a silver cross extended out, it abruptly stopped, revealing a page containing a glimpse of a grand story. On December 29, 1349, in the light of assault by numinous episcopate, George Augustus III, with the support of Evernight Goddess and Lord of Storms, dissolved his parliament and reconstituted his kingdom into an empire by proclaiming himself emperor. December 29, 1349. HQ of the numinous episcopate, southern continent. After the council dispersed, Lucian reclined in his main seat alone in the main chambers, his thoughts flying to the declaration of George Augustus III. The gods were forced to support George due to his existence. The Evernight Goddess and the Lord of Storms granted George their consent to dissolve the parliament and turn Lowen into an empire. He had proclaimed himself the Emperor of Lowen with the unanimous support of all parties. Though Lucian somewhat expected it, witnessing it happen before his eyes felt surreal. Others weren't much better, they were shell-shocked in the face of this turn of events. After all, This truly changed a lot of things, the most important of which was the apotheosis of George Augustus III. Unlike before, he had a real shot at becoming the Black Emperor now with the support of the Evernight goddess and Lord of Storms. He no longer had to worry much about instabilities and uncertainties. By becoming the Emperor of Lowen with the full support of all, his path to godhood had become stable and firm. Given all of this, stopping his apotheosis was going to be far more difficult than it was in the original story. They probably had to go all out, bringing in all the help they could get. Only then was there a chance of success, though the plausibility of this scenario was predicated on the fact that the Evernight goddess and Lord of Storms didn't intervene directly. If they did, the resistance would be futile. Lucian should probably start looking for alts and gods, but he decided to push this endeavor for another day as he looked at the opening door of the chamber, and from behind it, his teacher emerged, holding a suitcase. "You are leaving, teacher?" the demon of the end asked, standing up from his seat and walking towards Hermes. "Yes," Hermes hummed. "My job here is done." "I understand," Lucian nodded, standing in front of his teacher. "But will you participate in the war?" "Probably not." Hermes paused, considering for a moment. "Until its end stage when you invade the northern continent." "You think I can?" Lucian asked. Hermes shook his head. "You are not just the Archangel of Death," he said lightly, "but also miracles, Lucian." Lucian mirrored his smile. "Take care then, teacher. You will always have a place here." "That's good to hear." Hermes nodded contentedly, his figure fading away into the dreams of the world, leaving behind a whisper. "All the best, Lucian." "Until next time, teacher," Lucian whispered back, witnessing Hermes fade away into the unreal realms of the mind. Then he walked back to his seat, raking it with a prolonged sigh. Before him were an array of documents placed on the painted table. It was a personal profile of every saint belonging to the numinous episcopate. Even since the council ended, he had been reviewing them thoroughly. Yes, he was selecting members for his royal council, but some of the seats had already been filled by angels long before his declaration in the council. Lucian had chosen Sia Palenque Eggers as Lord of War, considering her millennia of experience in military combat. As for Hater, he would be the Lord of Whispers considering he single-handedly managed to expand the influence of numinous episcopate into the northern continent, though the branches there had been disbanded and called back before the assault. The Lord of War and the Lord of Whispers were the two most important positions in the royal council other than the Hand of Emperor, as they directly and indirectly protected the crown and the empire. Thus, his angels were most suited for those positions. Now, for who was going to be his hand, the choice was pretty obvious. There was no one more suitable for this position than his father, but Lucian hadn't yet finalized it for obvious reasons. However, not only did the Hand of the Emperor have the ideal candidates, but so did the Lords of Faith and Information. Reinette Tinker and Bernadette Gustave. Reinette Tinker fulfilled every quality he deemed required for Lord of Faith. This position would also grant her immense political power, which would be all the more helpful in curbing the beliefs of the outer gods when the barrier weakens further with passing years, but where her loyalties ultimately lay was still a question. The same could be said for Bernadette Gustave. If she became the Sage Sequence 2 of the Hermit pathway, she would gain the authority of Information, which makes her all the more suitable for the position of Lord of Information. However, her case was even more complicated than Reinette's. Lucian brooded on their cases, undecided and uncertain, then pushed them to the back of his mind for now, electing to rather focus on the remaining vacant positions. The Lord of Coins and the Lord of Order both were important positions no less than others and, in some ways, even more so. The Silent One picked the personal profiles of his saints, serening the suitable candidates for those two seats. Time ticked on. Laosian became too engrossed in the selection, cutting down the number of candidates into 4, whose profiles were spread out before him as he tapped the end of his pen on the table thoughtfully. But he was soon interrupted by none other than his father. "Father," Lucian asked. Isaac Eggers took a seat by his side. "Have you finalized the selection?" he asked Hack, looking at the 4 personal profiles of the saints. "Almost," Lucian said, then he continued swiftly, feeling the air thicken with heaviness. Why are you here, father? Azek was silent for a moment, then met his silver eyes. I am ready, son. Are you sure? Lucian asked, concerned. There is no need to. I am, Azek cut him off firmly. It's time I face my past. Lucian peered at his father, finding nothing but grim determination, so he nodded, teleporting the files on the table to his room. As he stood up, he extended his hand to his father and said, before we can face your past, there is someone you should meet. Who? Azek asked, clasping his hand and standing up as well. Lucian took out a badge engraved with the symbol of a cross from within the darkness of his robes. Adam, the son of the Creator. Azek took a breather, his dark eyes flashing with realization. So it really is, him. The one who is supporting you. You guessed it. Lucian acknowledged, though his tone held to surprise, what gave it away. There are not a lot of beings on the world that can keep your epical operation under wraps till the last moment. Azek spoke lightly. Though I was still unsure until you confirmed it yourself. I knew this was inevitable. Lucian chuckled and shook his head. The wisest were going to connect the dots soon and later. Indeed. Azek nodded. So, why are you taking me to meet him? And do you truly understand the being you are dealing with? He is dangerous, incredibly so. If my scrambled memories were anything to go by, even gods were said to pale in comparison. Lucian met his dark eyes. Trust me on this, father, he merely said. Azek sighed a long and heavy sigh, then his eyes regained their firmness. Let's go, then. Lucian gripped the cross badge tighter, and immediately, their surroundings became illusory and ethereal, melting away into bone pillars, a light cross, rows of white pews, ribbed vaults, and stained glass windows, all coming together to unveil a holy cathedral. They appeared at the end of the nave, near the entrance of the bone cathedral, as Adam stood up from the front row of pews, put his book aside, and walked towards them. Azek Eggers gazed around at the bones embedded everywhere throughout the church, feeling uncomfortable in their presence. They gave off a peculiar aura that reminded him of his father, and garbled mix of ancient, manic, and Delphied, and he hated them. But that aura vanished as a warm gaze focused on him, and he looked up to meet those clear golden eyes filled with purity and innocence. They eerily reminded him of Lukton's eyes when he abandoned him in the footsteps of that orphanage. Those were the eyes of the angel of imagination. Couldn't say he expected that. Ammonizes has not left any backhand in him. Adam spoke, his voice so gentle and kind, like a compassionate priest on a divine mission to save the world. You can take him there. That's good. Lucian breathed a sigh of relief, yet there was still a tinge of anxiety in his gaze, as if those words held something that deeply concerned him. Ammonizes. Azek thought, his brows furrowed in pain as the memories of his father cursing that very name countless times flashed through his mind. That's the true name of the Evernight goddess. Father, Lucian called, concerned as his palm began lighting with a silver light, reaching for his father's brow, but Adam interrupted, waving his hand at Azek and alleviating his pain. You must hurry, Adam urged. All of his suppressed memories are returning, yet his soul remains divided. Azek had numerous questions on his tongue, but he never got a chance to express them, for his son had already plunged them into the palette of colors that was the spirit world at unimaginable speeds. Somewhere hidden in the Berserk Sea, Lucian and Azek landed inside a dark and cold mausoleum. Around them were open coffins, filled with rotting corpses with white feathers on their backs. The son of death immediately turned to look in the direction of flights of stairs that led deeper into the mausoleum, which was covered in a swirling black smog. Something is calling out to me from there. He whispered, his gaze fixated on the stairs, then turned towards his son wearily. I think it's time for an explanation, son. Lucian faced his father somberly, then told the truth about how death divided his soul to transform him into a vessel for his revival. Azek took a moment to digest his words. So what are my choices? He ultimately asked, his eyes set on resolution. Lucian began heavily. You have 3 choices, father. First, heed the call in your soul and proceed to seek completeness on your own, enabling your father to revive within you. Second, allow me to extract halves of your souls from your body and artificial death. I will then fuse them together, restoring your completeness. But if I do this, you will no longer be the present you but an amalgamation of everything you have held and carried throughout all your lives. Third, it's to give up everything and directly leave. You will forever be stuck at your current level. You will have no way of advancing further. You will still die again and again, waking up with no memories and repeatedly searching for your past experiences. The choices were put forward, and the world held its breath in anticipation. Amidst the heavy and somber silence, Isaac Eggers looked at Incian, a contented smile gracing his lips. "Guide me, son." Lucian smiled, a smile that spoke volumes of his relief, then he hugged his father, saying, "See you on the other side, father." A veil of darkness consumed Isaac Eggers, plunging him into the embrace of Somnus. Fusion. Lucian drifted in the heart of darkness, just darkness devoid of anything and everything splayed all about him. Nothing seemed to escape its nihilistic embrace, not even the faintest of lights or the lowest of sounds. Yet he remained, placing his hand on his chest. He then raised his index and middle fingers together, his silver eyes set in resolution. Amidst the darkness, above his fingers, a white star was born, emitting a faint yet clear light like the evening star. It drove away the darkness surrounding him, revealing a large and withered island, and above it, two figures floated next to each other. One was a man who had seen the vicissitudes of life, and the other was a dark green colossal snake with a face strikingly similar to the man, both still within the embrace of Somnus. The brightness of the white star drenched their shapes, rendering them ethereal and illusory, until they, too, began to emanate streams of light, reflecting the star. Then, they all began to converge together, swirling around each other like planets revolving around their star. And the fusion began. The streams of lights were the halves of the soul of Isaac Egger, and the white star they were converging to was the essence of soul. It was the condensation of the soul authority that the Reaper held. That authority enabled him to control, manipulate, and alter the souls of living beings. He could even create the soul itself. To put it simply, he could use his soul authority to connect directly with the essence of all beings, alerting and modifying them to his will, from something as simple as their thoughts to something as complex as their personalities, even their gender and characteristics. Everything about them was subject to his will. But soul was an art, so possessing finesse was compulsory. Your work demanded your absolute concentration. A single mistake or error could have unimaginable consequences, like opening a Pandora box. Situations like this made Lucian question from time to time whether the Earth Mother was the most powerful deity. The inconceivable horrors she could unleash in the name of life made him shiver. Oh, he could see why the Mother Goddess of Depravity was so feared by all. Anyway, coming back, soul was indeed an art, and Lucian was an artist, possessing everything needed to create a masterpiece that would be unrivaled in epochs to come. Thus, it would be no problem for him to fuse the souls of his father together. But the situation was not as simple as he made it out to be in the choices he presented. His father noticed it yet chose to place his trust in him. And Lucian wasn't about to let him down, even if it meant confronting the will of the fallen Death, himself. Yes, the Underworld Emperor. He may have fallen, but his will still lies in dormancy within the halves of his father's soul, so when they began to combine, he would awaken. This could explain why Evernight Goddess didn't offer Isaac the option of fusing his soul, but rather offered to stitch them together in the original book. She simply didn't want to take any chances of the Underworld Emperor awakening. But Lucian was going to fuse the souls of his father, despite the risk of confronting the dormant will of the Underworld Emperor. Why? Family, duh. Though, as you could expect, he came prepared, holding no apprehension or concern. His unwavering confidence emanated from who he was and what he represented. Lucian may just be an archangel in power, but his existence, his being, his essence weighed far more than that. He was death, Adam had said, the ultimate end of all things. He was a walking singularity of the cosmos. And he was going to use all of that to his advantage for the coming confrontation with the Underworld Emperor. There was also the fact that Underworld Emperors would only resist instinctively until fully awakened. This alone was a huge advantage that he could maneuver within the confrontation. Nevertheless, the Demon of the End knew he was taking a huge risk, as you could never underestimate a god, even if they had fallen. Yet he forged ahead with utter determination, his silver eyes gleaming brilliantly as the halves of his father's souls united in the shape of streams of light emanating from the figures revolving around the silver star that floated above his fingers. A profound silence filled the expanse the moment streams of light united, which was then immediately shattered by a star-chilling roar. Roar. It came from everywhere yet nowhere, it filled everything yet nothing, it bore burning rage yet serene repose, it was, he. He was Salinger, the Underworld Emperor. And, he, was awakening from, his, millennia of slumber from within, his, son. At the same time, the demon of the end reached into the depths of his existence, tapping into parts he didn't even know existed, and he touched. Lucian looked up at the connected streams of lights that represented not only his father's fusion but also the awakening of the Underworld Emperor. His fingers still held the soul star that guided the fusion, and his silver eyes remained brilliant. Nothing seemed to have changed with him at all. Yet he opened his mouth and spoke in a voice that caused the world to tremble. "Submit to me, Salinger." Backland, Lowen Kingdom. In St. Samuel Cathedral, Leonard was seated in the urgent meeting that was called in light of the declaration of George Augustus III, along with all of the Red Gloves. Even Madame Daly was present, sitting not far from him. Archbishop Anthony was personally leading the meeting, his face somber like never before as he briefly reported on the situation. Leonard listened listlessly. He merely raised a brow at the fact that their king their emperor held the divine specter of the goddess when he made the declaration. It should have been shocking, but the things he had seen and heard in the past day made him somewhat numb. "Old man," he thought. "Do you have any idea what is happening?" But before Pallas could respond, Leonard saw darkness that appeared to be everything yet nothing. A strange and distinct voice pierced his skull, forcing him to grip his pounding head, his face twisted in agony, mirroring the faces of his colleagues surrounding him, from St. Anthony to Sequence 8 Henry. Actually, it wasn't only them, every Beyander of the pathways belonging to eternal darkness was going through the same experience, including the Evernight goddess and the god of combat. In the tenebrous heaven, the Evernight goddess looked down at the berserk sea. All she saw there was a swath of pure, deep black darkness. There weren't any gales, massive waves, dark clouds, lightning, torrential rain, or sunlight. Nothing except darkness, which seemed to be everything yet nothing. And from there came a strange and distinct voice, yet unlike others. She understood him. "Submit to me, Salinger." As I thought. He is truly a singularity given form. Ammonize's thought, flicking her index finger. Immediately, the berserk sea fell into concealment, effectively cutting off his voice from everyone. Ammonize's then entered her mythical creature form, summoning her uniquenesses into Eiler. Hairy Palms, the Evernight goddess, was ready to descend into the berserk sea if there was even a sign of Salinger's awakening. She abruptly turned to her side, grasping the twilight glare of the god of combat. He stood on the fringes of his kingdom, wielding his great sword. And the Empress of Horror frowned imperceptibly behind her veil. From the looks of it, a war of gods was going to erupt if Lucian couldn't stop the revival of Salinger. "Submit to me, Salinger." Lucian imbued his voice with all of the weight of his singular existence. It was similar to how Klein used the level of Saphira Castle to suppress Mr. Error from escaping after he lost the gambit. When he delved into himself and reached the singularity, he chose to draw its weight rather than its power, knowing that if he did, he wouldn't be able to endure it in his current self and probably lose control, bringing about an early apocalypse. No, thanks. Anyway, this alone should be enough to deal with the awakening will of the Underworld Emperor. And he was proven right. The awakening Underworld Emperor slowed down. Even his will began to weaken and wane as the weight of his existence wore on him. Obviously, there was fierce resistance, even if it was instinctive, but Lucian gritted his teeth, gathering his weight and bringing it down on the resisting will in suppression. "Submit," he hollered. "Dissipatef." Roar. A unwilling roar echoed before silence filled everything. And Lucian took a breather, feeling the will of the Underworld Emperor enter dormancy and begin to dissipate. In his caution, he did not remove his suppression as he refocused on the fusion of his father's soul. Tane ticked on. Seconds turned into minutes. Minutes turned into hours. As he guided the fusion with utmost concentration while constantly suppressing the will of the Underworld Emperor. Soon, the dazzling figures of Azek Eggers and artificial death disintegrated completely, breaking and combining with streams of light that were merging to form an angelic figure. Lucian raised his eyes to the angelic figure bathed in light. And he exhaled in relief, reaching his hand to grasp the white soul star back into himself, and with that, the brilliant angelic figure dimmed, revealing Azek Eggers, who had achieved completeness. One IL's father was still within the embrace of Somnus, it would take some time for him to awaken. As for the will of the Underworld Emperor, it was almost gone, the last remnants of him should be returning to the river of eternal darkness. All in all, his father was fine, his situation was as stable as it could be. Considering this, he chose to focus on two items floating in front of him. A dark backside and a golden bird accessory. They were items that his father left behind after his fusion. He reached for them. The side was the uniqueness of the death pathway. The golden bird accessory was the legacy of ancient goddess Grace. The moment he grasped them, he immediately felt a connection to them, granting him preliminary control over them. Death is truly my fate, isn't it? Lucian smiled wearily. I wonder, who arranged that? Sage. Lucian was taken by surprise as he soon returned to the HQ of the numinous episcopate with his sleeping father. Sia and Hatter were waiting for him in the main chambers. They reported what had happened to everyone in the numinous episcopate. It wasn't only them. His messenger, Merlin, quickly followed them up with reports from all around the world, which were coming through the information network of spirits that Merlin personally oversaw. All in all, what happened was that every meander of the pathways of the eternal darkness was affected when he brought the weight of his existence into reality. Okay, maybe he overdid it. Nonetheless, this incident didn't have any major repercussions, as his voice, which was broadcasted to everyone, was swiftly cut off. He highly suspected this was the work of the Evernight goddess. If she wasn't certain of his existence before, this would be more than enough to give him away. Anyway, what happened had happened. There was no point in brooding on it gloomily. He just needed to be all the more cautious in the coming chaotic times. Lucian informed his angels that the disturbance was caused by him retrieving the death uniqueness, which he was holding along with the legacy of the ancient goddess of death. Then he gave them his father, who was floating alongside him still asleep. He asked them to take his father to his chamber, but he ordered Merlin to keep an eye on his father and notify him as soon as he awoke. Sta and Hatter first congratulated him without any surprise, as if his attaining the death uniqueness was a given. Well, it indeed was. Then off they went along with Merlin, taking his father with him. Hater immediately returned as though he remembered something, which came in the form of a blood-red orb like a miniature crimson moon. This was one of the artifacts that were seized from the Rose School of Thought during the assault. Oh, he knew about this cursed thing. Your inferences are correct, Hater. Lucian held the miniature crimson moon, observing it keenly. This is indeed linked to the mother goddess of depravity. Within this, there is a drop of blood that she personally blessed. Hater became all the more grave in the face of revelation. Seal this among the Grade D artifacts, Inkling ordered, passing the miniature crimson moon back to Hater. In some way, this is even more dangerous than them. It may come in handy in the war. Yes, my lord. Halter held the crimson orb ever so carefully, as though he were holding a nuclear bomb. By the way, have the last remnants of the Rose School of Thought been purged? Lucian asked. Not yet. Hater shook his head. Reinette is still on it, but she promised she would be done by the new year. Reinette. Lucian brooded, thinking about the loyalty of the Queen of Curses. Tell her to come and meet me when she is free today. I will inform her, my lord. Hater nodded. Come on then, Lucian said, striding towards the door of the main chambers. Brief on the reception for the council till I reach my room. Hatter obliged, walking out of the main chambers with his lord as he told him about the reactions and responses of everyone to the council, their pacing figures illuminated by the afternoon light of the sun. After a brief respite with coffee and a newspaper, Larcian made his way towards Bernadette Gustave's room, knocking on her door. It opened immediately, revealing Queen Mystic, primed and prepared. He highly suspected she had been waiting all day for this moment. "Let's go," Bernadette said so as soon as their eyes met. And so, without wasting time, Lucian grabbed her hand and teleported them to uninhabited island on the edge of the Sonia Sea near the southern continent. Bernadette stood on the white beach, looking ahead at the expanse of ocean in silence. Lucian summoned a dark black scythe into his bronze hands. Bernadette focused on the scythe, though her mythic eyes remained dim, attributing to her cautiousness. Nevertheless, her clairvoyant senses were more than enough to give her clues about the scythe. As that, she trailed off, her unspoken guess carried in the air. Yes, Lucian confirmed her guess. The uniqueness of the death pathway. Bernadette sucked in a breath, her eyes slightly widening at the scythe. Maybe this was her first time actually seeing a uniqueness in form. "Begin," Lucian ordered with finality. "I will protect you." Bernadette got a hold of herself and nodded in resolution. Then she reached out her right hand and quickly drew out words filled with stellar radiance in the air. These words, which were similar to the words on the blasphemy slate, quickly interwoved into a strange symbol and opened a secret door that seemed to lead deep into the spirit world. A separate dimensional space holding a lot of powerful things was behind it. It was a literal treasure trove. Following that, the secret door opened, and a strong gust of wind blew out, transforming into an entity that was half man, half air. His upper body was wrapped in white cloth. "Sage frontlet," Bernadette ordered in a calm yet dignified voice. The man responded respectfully and removed an accessory from the white cloth wrapped around his body. The core of this accessory was a vertical eye embedded with diamonds. It shimmered with pure light, exuding an abnormal holiness. It was filled with intelligence, but it also appeared cold without any warmth. Sage frontlet, a great and sealed artifact. It was crafted by Roussel Gustave using the sequence 2 characteristic of the hermit pathway. However, its negative effects were so severe that Bernadette usually avoided carrying it with her. "I need your help," Bernadette began, pointing the sage frontlet at Lucian. The silent one merely flicked his index finger, causing the diamond accessory to lose its luster and wither into dust, leaving behind the sequence 2 characteristic of the hermit pathway. Bernadette took the characteristic and concocted it into a potion that would allow her to advance into angel. After finishing it, she instinctively looked up at Lucian, who nodded lightly in reassurance. Then the Queen Mystic looked down at the bubbling potion, each bubble containing a transparent Eve. "Father, I am one step closer to you," she thought, drinking the potion with resoluteness. Immediately, her body turned ethereal at a discerning pace. She began to break down into thick and complicated knowledge, changing into an existence that was a flux of information. The entire uninhabited island, as well as the surrounding winds, clouds, seawater, and waves, all lost their sense of reality. It was as though they had been restored to the most fundamental blocks of information. This was an extremely dangerous state. If one's willpower wasn't strong enough, their luck wasn't good enough, and they weren't prepared enough, the knowledge that they had transformed into would be infiltrated by all kinds of information from around the world within seconds. They would be washed away, assimilated, and thus quickly lose consciousness. They wouldn't be able to reassemble their bodies, turning into a very strange and difficult monster to deal with in mysticism, the knowledge demon. But Bernadette had relied on the sage frontlet and had previously transformed into a flux of information on several occasions. Although it was limited to 2 to 3 seconds and didn't last too long, it was still considered experience. At that moment, she tried her best to maintain her consciousness and establish a connection with information produced in the spirit world that was created as a result of her preventing the descent of the true creator, which was as high level as a disaster could get in the world. That information had a clear imprint belonging to her, and it involved a very high level of power. It was exceptionally solid, and couldn't be dispersed by other information for short periods of time. It helped her stabilize her consciousness and slowly gather the dissipating flux of information around her body. At this moment, Lupton floated in the sky outside the region that Bernadette was promoting, holding his scythe. Everything in that location had vanished, having been reduced to formless and colorless information. Even the spirit world was not immune, mingling with everything to generate a cyclone of information, and in the center of it all was a building and struggling silhouette that belonged to Bernadette Gustave. To be honest, the situation was bizarre, and that made it all the more fascinating. Lucien mumbled under his breath, but suddenly his silver eyes narrowed as he gripped the handle of his scythe tighter and tighter in preparation. The gazes of gods were directed here for a moment, flickering past them, though one remained longer, focusing solely on the swirl of information before following the example of others. The gazes of gods were directed here for a moment, flickering past them, though one remained longer, focusing solely on the swirl of information before following the example of others. But it was enough for him to grasp the identity of the god behind the gaze. He sensed a divine aura that invoked all of his scientific and fundamental knowledge, grounding him in the essence of the world. It was the god of steam and machinery. Normally, Lucien wouldn't have been able to sense the gazes of gods, but with the death uniqueness, his senses have been conceptually enhanced, enabling him to perceive even the slightest traces of divinity and authority. His senses were sharp and clear more than ever, and he was still not letting down his guard. Even though the god of steam and machinery didn't choose to intervene with the ascension of Bernadette, the same couldn't be said for someone else. Time ticked by. There were several times when Bernadette wavered on the border of losing consciousness, but in the end, she managed to tile through it. She gathered all the information that belonged to her and began to reconstruct her body. At that moment, she gradually felt the concern Admiral of Stars Catalia had for her. She felt the members of the Element Dawn and her crew making their daily prayers. This stabilized her condition better, allowing her to resist the ancient will that was slowly developing in her body. Suddenly, a series of secret information came from nowhere. Taking the opportunity while Bernadette was reforming her body, it attempted to fuse with her in a bid to corrupt her. This was interference from the hidden sage. However, Lucien emerged in its path, firmly holding the scythe in his hands. By exerting primary control over it, he invoked its authority over the surroundings. Immediately, a dreadful curtain of death enveloped Bernadette, effectively blocking the hidden information. As they made contact with the curtain, they withered away. Firmly grabbing this sudden moment of peace, Bernadette completely reassembled her body and used her own anchors to balance out the terrifying will that was surfacing in her body. At that moment, she had truly become a Sequence 2 angel of the mystery prior pathway, an important figure in the mysterious world that could be addressed as a secret existence. Congratulations, Lucien appeared in front of her. Thank you, Bernadette bowed her head gratefully. Lupton hummed. Come on, he said, extending his hand towards her. It's best if we leave. I can feel Hidden Sage's million sighs on our back. Bernadette blinked, but there was no hesitation in her actions as she took his hand. They teleported back to the HQ of the Numinous Episcopate, landing on the balcony of her room. Right on the heels of that, the Queen Mystic confronted the Reaper. So can you tell the truth now? She gulped in a mixture of anticipation and fear. About my father. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.